Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to the NBA Deeper Dive presented by Awesemo.com. Got a nice little 9-game slate for you guys tonight. Sorry, having some audio issues here. All right, so got a great slate for you. Sponsor of the show is Super Draft. We're going to talk a lot about their multiplier system and how you can take advantage of that. And joined today by Adam, aka Ship My Money DFS share. Adam, how you doing, man?
Doing good. The slate feels weird. It's been a while since we've had a slate where like coming in there aren't five like guys that look like amazing plays. They're going to be like 40% owned. It's felt like some really chalky slates lately, but this one I think is a lot more wide open, so it should be fun.
Definitely. I mean, those guys always get our hopes up a little bit too much. We can spread it around. No Crusoes like last night, unfortunately, but we got some great options today. And we got some questionable players that maybe we'll get some news throughout the show that will really change the slate. So should be good. Maybe we can talk about some top shots along the way.
Yeah, I saw you made a little investment today.
Oh yeah, I saw this Luca Cool Cat. It was spiking, so I was like, I need it for my challenge, and they had the number one, so I was like, damn.
Not bad.
Thanks, man. All right. Well, our first game today is Golden State at Orlando. Before we get into the game, though, I want to mention a little bit about Super Draft. So they actually don't have the first game on the slate usually, so you can go over there and build lineups after some of the other slates lock. But they've been really upping their game ever since partnering with Caesars Casino. And you can actually earn Caesars rewards points on Super Draft to use at their properties. So I'm really excited from playing there a bunch to maybe take the lady out for a nice weekend or something. I think she might get a little bit more enthusiastic about my DFS habit if I do. So if you go over to Super Draft and use the promo code Awesemo21, you can get $50 free when you deposit 50 or more. And I almost forgot, guys, if you could please hit the like button, then we greatly appreciate that. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button and check out Super Draft at superdraft.io. All right, Golden State at Orlando. Draymond Green kind of got the better of us the other night, where he was scratched after lock, and I believe he is questionable tonight. So that could be some of the news that we're looking for. But it's the first game of the slate, so we should have that news before lock. Fingers crossed. So what do you make of Draymond Green being questionable here?
Yeah, so it makes a pretty big difference since we already have Kevon Looney out and we have James Wiseman out as well. You've had Draymond Green be a really good play and a really good player since Wiseman went down. Last game, like you said, he was scratched after lock. You had Michael Mulder get the start, but it was basically just a spot start where he played 11, 12 minutes. And then you got, 14 minutes. But you got 27 minutes in regulation off the bench from Eric Paschall, who has basically just been the backup to Draymond this whole time. But he runs into a lot more minutes. He's a productive player. So if Draymond sits, you have a $3,800 power forward eligible player in Eric Paschall, who most likely plays at least mid-20s in minutes. It's not like Golden State really has other center options that they can use against Vooch. They're going to be undersized no matter what. So I expect Paschall gets those minutes. You also it also potentially could open up more minutes for a Kent Bazemore, who played 24 minutes in that game. But Paschall would be, I think, the primary beneficiary. If he's in, then you actually have a decent value in Draymond, who's only 6,600 on Draftkings, despite averaging over 1.1 fantasy points per minute in these games without Wiseman. He's averaging 34 minutes per game. So I think that whoever's starting at center for Golden State is going to look like a good play here. Paschall would be one of the more popular values on the slate. Green wouldn't be nearly as popular, but would still, I think, project pretty well at 6,600.
Agreed. Yeah, Green could be pretty intriguing. And then Curry and Wiggins look like decent plays. Of course, we don't have any big injuries that we know of already. So probably not the most exciting game in this matchup versus Orlando, who typically is a little bit slower paced. But on the Orlando side, we have some nice value. So Evan Fournier has come back. He's had his price drop a little bit. And Nikola Vucevic has been an amazing fantasy option ever since Aaron Gordon and Cole Anthony have been out of the lineup, because he can actually do a lot of that distributing that they need on the Magic. And then finally, Michael Carter-Williams he came off this foot injury into big minutes from the jump, and he's always been an intriguing talent. Never really put it together as a point guard, but that was his original position, and that's what he's being put back into here. So, what are your priorities in the Magic?
Yeah, I think that Vooch, Fournier, and Carter Williams all look like pretty good options here in a big pace-up spot against Golden State. Vooch is the number one option, as always. There are several really good high-end centers on this slate, but I do think this is, for a 9-game slate, center's not quite as strong a position as it normally is, so it might be a little bit easier to get to Vooch. If Draymond's out, I think it becomes an even better spot for Vucevic, just a completely undersized front court that isn't going to have an answer for him defensively, but he's averaged over 1.4 fantasy points per minute this year with Fournier on the floor and with Gordon off it. Has an assist percentage over 20%, rebounding percentage over 20%, and his usage rate's up around 30%. So everything looks really good for Vooch. He's playing huge minutes as well. I love Vooch today. But then behind him, you have Evan Fournier, who jumped back in and played 31 and a half minutes last game. I think you see another around 32 minutes from him. He's got a 26% usage rate this year without Gordon on the floor, even with Vucevic on the floor. So I think that on DraftKings in particular, Fournier is a little bit underpriced at 5,800. Michael Carter Williams more favorably priced on Fanduel than DraftKings, but he has guard and forward eligibility on DraftKings, so he'll be pretty easy to get into lineups. I expect his per minute production to take a little bit of a hit now that Fournier is back, and Vooch obviously was never gone. But even if you're getting 0.85 to 0.9 fantasy points per minute from Carter Williams, he's always been a guy who is a better fantasy producer than actual basketball player. And obviously all that we really care about is his fantasy production. So I think if you're going to get around 30 minutes from him in this spot against Golden State, he looks like a pretty good value here.
Awesome. And the team recently signed Chasen Randall, and I remember him vaguely from a sense like this, but he's a backup point guard, right? So
yep.
Not going to affect Michael Carter Williams' minutes, but that's someone to keep an eye on. Anyway, on FanDuel, these guys all look pretty solid as well. Terence Ross, he had been getting a bump with Fournier and MCW out, but it looks like his minutes have gone back a little bit as he's resumed his role off the bench. Now, Denver at Cleveland. Denver has struggled with a lot of injuries. Tonight is no exception. We got Gary Harris. Believe he is he's out tonight, and then Paul Millsap is also out, so that's opened up a lot of opportunities for other guys, but the prices have come up to match that. So what are you seeing in Denver today?
Yeah, and Will Barton's questionable also after missing the last couple of games, so that's pretty important because if he's out, you're probably getting Monte Morris back in the starting lineup. You could get Campazzo, but my guess would be Morris, and he would look like a decent value. If Barton's in, then I don't think there's a ton that I like from Denver. Their prices have come up to counteract, Millsap being out and Harris being out. On FanDuel, JaMychal Green's only 4,200, which is a pretty good price tag for him. He's playing around 30 minutes per game without Millsap. The problem is that for the season, he's around a 1 fantasy point per minute player, but he takes a really big hit when he's playing alongside Nikola Jokic. He's only averaged about 3/4 of a fantasy point per minute when Jokic is on the floor with him this year. So when he was really cheap, it was still appealing because you're saying, okay, well, he's going to get probably 6 or 7 minutes more than normal. So I'll deal with the decrease in productivity. But now the salaries come up to match that. So on DraftKings, it's a lot tougher to get to him. Michael Porter Williams also more favorably priced on FanDuel. But the one guy here who's going to look good no matter what is Nikola Jokic, who is, always expensive and always kind of tough to get to because he's a center, but he's also always one of the highest projected players on the slate. And tonight's no different. There's nothing about Cleveland that should be able to slow Jokic down. He averages like 36 minutes per game. He averages about 1.6 fantasy points per minute. There's just nothing to dislike about the guy that leads the team in minutes played, usage, assist percentage, and rebounding percentage.
Definitely, yeah. Jokic, strong MVP candidate this year. Well, I guess it's a little bit controversial, but he's been doing it all. His price is really high tonight, 11K on DraftKings and 10.6 on FanDuel. Certainly a great option, especially with some of the guys out. And then, as you mentioned, Michael Porter on FanDuel has a nice little salary, and JaMychal Green's salary hasn't really gone up on FanDuel. So, although you're hitting on a good point that his permanent production has really been something to desire, I still might take a chance on FanDuel. Now, on the Cleveland side, we have Andre Drummond kind of still out for trade bait. we'll see how that ends up playing out. But the result is we have some interesting opportunities for the rest of the team because Andre Drummond is kind of a defensive rebound hogger. And then he also was pretty high usage. In fact, it had the highest usage on the team for the year. So we got to think that that could benefit more guys than just the direct guy who's getting the minutes, Jared Allen. So what have you seen since Andre Drummond's been out?
Yeah, and he even has Drummond even has a 15% assist percentage this year. So taking him off the floor, I mean, it opens up minutes for Jared Allen, but it also opens up opportunities for the other starters. And it's scary to me how well or how good Cleveland players look tonight because they are a big underdog against Denver. They don't have a particularly high team total, but it's just that pricing on the Cavaliers hasn't adjusted for the main piece of their offense to be out. So you have Jared Allen here, only 6,800 on DraftKings. He has played in the 2 games since Drummond was taken out of the rotation. He's only played about 28 and 29 minutes, but he's also lost minutes to blowouts in both of those games. Obviously, this game can blow out as well, but the point is that his salary is essentially priced for him to play in a blowout right now. So if he does only get 28 or 29 minutes, he's probably fine. But if this game is competitive to the end and you get 32 or 33 minutes from Allen, he's averaged 1.2 minutes with Cleveland, 1.2 fantasy points per minute with Cleveland when he's not playing alongside Drummond. He averaged about 1.15 to 1.16 with the Nets. So the production has been consistent from him, and he's going to be underpriced there. You also get Colin Sexton and Darius Garland benefiting from Drummond being out. Sexton without Drummond on the floor this year has about a 29% usage rate. Darius Garland's at about 25%. Those come down a little bit if you put both of them on the floor together, but Cleveland also staggers their minutes. So you're going to get a nice chunk of minutes where Darius Garland is the clear number one option offensively. You're going to get a nice chunk of minutes where it's the same thing for Colin Sexton. So $5,400 for Darius Garland, I think, stands out as a really good salary on DraftKings. $7,300 for Sexton has some nice upside as well. And then you have Cedi Osman, who started in place of Taurean Prince last game. His salary's come up a little bit. He's $4,800 now on DraftKings. I believe he was $3,300 last game. But you're still, if everything goes according to plan, you're probably getting 32 plus minutes from Cedi, which it's unlikely that he breaks the slate, but it's still a reasonable value that at the small forward position, you can kind of plug him in and be able to pay up for some of the other options that we really like on this slate. So I think Allen, Sexton, and Garland are actually exciting plays here. And then Cedi is just someone that fits nicely into your lineups probably.
Definitely. I mean, the guys that are in that 4 to 5K range, like you're going to need several of them, at least on DraftKings. So Cedi Osman does stand to benefit a lot. And he's a nice option with Taurean Prince out. So I agree with that. Garland is really jumping out at me. He's someone that he seems to benefit as far as assists and usage over the recent run here. And then we have JaVale McGee. He's 3,600 on DraftKings and Fanduel. Now, he's busted pretty much every game, but I'm like, there's a glimmer of hope because he has a 24% usage on the year. He gets a lot of rebounds. Basically, when he's on the court, he's really producing. It's just they don't play him very much. So do you see any potential in JaVale as a sleeper?
I think there's potential there. It's more of a massive field tournament play, I think. The thinking for me is that you have Willy Hernangomez as a very popular value option on this slate at basically the same price point. And Hernangomez, obviously, assuming he starts, is going to project better than McGee. But McGee has averaged 1.25 fantasy points per minute this year. If, let's say, Jared Allen gets in foul trouble against Nikola Jokic, which certainly could happen, and McGee plays 20 minutes instead of 15, then he at least, has that potential to outscore the more popular Hernangomez. So I think that would be the thought process, is that you can get still a really high upside build with a lower probability player in McGee, but someone that still has a high ceiling if he manages to get the minutes. But the point being, it is a lower probability play. So in your smaller field tournaments, it's probably not really necessary.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the results kind of speak for themselves, but I'm still always drawn to the guys in the 3 to 4K range, even if they suck. So
yeah. And it's hard to find guys in that price range that can produce like McGee.
Yeah.
Like normally when you roster guys in that price range, you're saying, okay, I hope he plays better than normal, and I hope he plays more minutes than normal. With McGee, you're basically just saying, I hope he plays more minutes than normal because I know he's going to produce when he's out there.
Definitely. And one thing that's a bummer is Jared Allen doesn't really foul. He only averages 2 per 36. That's much lower than Andre Drummond, so the chance of foul trouble benefiting McGee is pretty small. But when he's chucking, maybe he could even play some power forward. So there's some ways you can get there. Now, Atlanta versus Boston is a very intriguing game because Jaylen Brown is questionable tonight.
He's available. Just came in.
Oh, nice. Jaylen Brown is available tonight. So it really is a matchup that's kind of driving my interest in Boston. Atlanta, very young team that's pretty weak on the defensive end. So the injury news with Boston tonight is Daniel Tice. He is he's back tonight. So that means the big situation's a little bit in flux, but we know the three main guys, Brown, Tatum, and Kemba Walker. It's just a matter of who are we going to put in our lineups tonight?
Yeah, those are obviously the three guys that stand out the most. And pricing is a little bit different between DraftKings and Fanduel. Jaylen Brown, I think, looks like the best out of the three. All three look fine on DraftKings, but I think Jaylen Brown looks like the best at 7,900. In the games, they've played 7 games together so far this season, all three of them. Brown and Tatum have both averaged about 1.15 fantasy points per minute. Kemba is a little shy of a fantasy point per minute. But you're getting a little bit of a discount on Brown. And him and Tatum both clearly have very high ceilings. Jason Tatum, I think, probably over a larger sample, outproduces Jaylen Brown, but given the little bit of a price discount, I think that Brown projects a little bit better. Kemba is really cheap on FanDuel at 6,200, whereas Brown is up to 8,400 and Tatum's at, I think, 9,400. So there's a bigger price gap between them, and I think you can expect Kemba to play 30 to 32 minutes. So even though he hasn't been very good this season, he's still getting opportunities. He's still, in the games that these guys have played together, he still has a usage rate over 26%. So the opportunities are there. You kind of just need him to start playing like Kemba Walker and not like whatever he's been this year.
So we just got the starting lineup for Orlando. Fournier and Ennis are in. They're probable already. So one big piece here is Khem Birch is starting. So that's kind of a new twist on their starting lineup, where previously it had been Gary Clark. Gary Clark was starting at power forward previously. So Khem Birch has been getting minutes all year. It's just he hasn't really broken any slates that I remember. So he is 3,600 on DraftKings, which seems like a pretty good price. How does this make you feel about Khem Birch?
Yeah, I think it's a good price for him. It's always it feels kind of uncomfortable since we don't really know how this is going to look, but he has played a nice chunk of minutes alongside Vooch earlier this year when the Magic were shorthanded. So I think it's not really surprising to see them do that. His playing time had been down recently, though, with Okeke coming back. Maybe you get 24. Like, Gary Clark doesn't have to play is the thing. Gary Clark played 20 minutes last game. Maybe you get 24, 25 minutes from Khem Birch. I think that's possible. And he is power forward eligible, which is really nice. So, depending what other value opens up today, I think as of right now, Birch actually looks like a pretty good value. Especially on a point per dollar basis. You can debate his ceiling for sure, playing alongside Vooch and playing alongside Fournier. But if he gets 24, 25 minutes, it's pretty likely he's at least getting you 17 or 18 fantasy points.
Yeah, Khem Birch is looking like a pretty decent play tonight. Not a huge priority. He's not he's a pretty good fantasy point per minute producer, but the one thing I'm worried about is Gary Clark really wasn't getting a ton of minutes in the same role. So there is potential that he's just kind of taking that role that wasn't that big. So do you ever read one way there? Do you think this means Gary Clark's out of the rotation, or does it just mean maybe they're switching some stuff around?
My guess is that Clark's out of the rotation, but I don't really have a good feel for it. I mean, looking back at the rotation last game, you had the center minutes being split between Vooch and Bamba. You had Birch essentially backing up Clark, but then Al-Farouq Amino was also in that rotation. So my guess, Gary Clark played 20 minutes, Birch played 16, Aminu played 12. So that's the 48 minutes of power forward. My guess is they're just taking Gary Clark out of the rotation, and you're going to get 24-ish from Birch, Aminu with 12-ish. I guess Okeke played 2. It looks like behind Fournier. Yeah, so my guess would be that Clark either doesn't play or plays like 12 minutes. My best guess is that you're getting like low to mid 20s from Birch, and then Aminu and maybe Clark behind him.
Nice. So that would make Birch somewhat intriguing. Maybe as a last man in.
Yeah.
All right.
0.72 fantasy points per minute for Birch alongside Vooch this year, 269 minutes.
Yeah, that's always not as good when you're playing with Vooch. So maybe a slight downtick there. On going back to Boston, so we kind of decide Kemba is a priority on Fanduel, and then they all look pretty solid on Draftkings. But then what about Daniel Tice coming back? He's been kind of their number one big throughout the course of the season, but the minutes are really shaky. That being said, it doesn't seem like there's a very clear pecking order night to night. So are you going to try to get some Tice in your lineups?
Yes, but I also think it depends on the starting lineup here. If I like Tice more if Tristan Thompson goes back to the bench. If they start Tice alongside Thompson, he averages about 0.8 fantasy points per minute with Thompson on the floor. He's a little over 0.9 fantasy points per minute without Thompson. So the minutes are inconsistent either way. I would rather know that he's getting most or all of his minutes without Thompson. I think on average he's going to play around 26 minutes, but it's very volatile. He could play 20, he could play 30. But I do think that if he's starting without Thompson, he looks a little bit better than if he's starting alongside Thompson. The rebounding numbers go up. The productivity goes up. It's not a bad matchup here. I do think they'll need him defensively, and most importantly, he's power forward eligible.
Nice. So Tice, a nice price point tonight. So someone worth looking at. On the Atlanta side, it's a little bit of a tougher match for Atlanta, with Boston being one of the better teams in the league. So no real injuries on the Atlanta side of note. So I'm not seeing a ton here, but they got some good fantasy producers like Trae Young, Collins, and Capella. And Gallo has been playing more minutes recently. So is anyone standing out for you?
Not as far as like someone that I would expect to be getting in a lot of lineups, but I do like Capella and Collins at their price points, because for the last several games, you're not getting more than like 5 minutes from either Bruno Fernando or Okongwu as the backup center. So most of the time you're getting either Capella or Collins on the floor at center. Capella's gotten over 30 minutes each of the last 2 games, which is something that hadn't happened for like 5 games before that. But the point here being that this season without Capella on the floor, Collins has averaged about 1.25 fantasy points per minute. Capella's been really good. He's averaged about 1.3 fantasy points per minute. So with their pricing where it is right now, particularly Capella on DraftKings, he's not as cheap on FanDuel. But if Capella gets like 32 minutes again, he's probably a good play at 7,200, averaging 1.3 fantasy points per minute. If Capella plays 28 minutes, you're probably getting more minutes from John Collins at center, which has been really valuable. And he's only $6,800. So I think that they negatively correlate, since Collins, like when Collins has a big game, it's very likely going to be a game where Capella plays fewer minutes. So I think they negatively correlate, but I think there's a good chance that one of them outperforms their pretty cheap DraftKings price tags.
Sure, yeah. I mean, these are some pretty good fantasy players, and Collins on FanDuel at 6,800. Since the salary cap's 10K higher there, that's a lower salary, which is pretty nice. Capella, his price has come down. It used to be like 10K earlier in the season, so that was a little bit ridiculous. But 7K, that's a little bit more palatable. All right, guys. So we have a special giveaway going on tonight. Hit us up on Twitter at Awesemo_com to enter our free NBA giveaway. You just got to predict whether Donovan Mitchell or Fred Van Elite will score more points tonight. One random winner will be selected to win a free monthly pass. So make sure to hit us up on Twitter at Awesemo_com. And guys, if you could hit the likes button, I appreciate that. All right. Moving on to the next game, Chicago at Philadelphia. So on Chicago, we haven't seen any like new injuries pop up, but Otto Porter Jr. continues to be out. So that's benefited a variety of guys. And Markkanen's out. So Garrett Temple, it has been the latest starter, and he was kind of a good value for a little bit, but his price has gone up a little bit. I heard people talking about the Sato as possibly a value option. What are you seeing on the Bulls tonight?
Yeah, not entirely confident in what the rotation is going to look like here because last game they benched Kobe White, Wendell Carter, and Patrick Williams at halftime. They started Satoransky, Young, and Denzel Valentine. They ended up coming back to win that game. They were down like 20 at the half. They came back and won by 3. So there's a chance that we get a weird lineup from the Bulls tonight. But for now, I'm assuming that we get that normal starting lineup. If you do get Satoransky starting in place of like Kobe White, or it probably wouldn't be in place of White. Maybe you get him starting alongside White and Levine. But if Satoransky starts, I think that he's a reasonable value at 4,200. He's always been a relatively productive guy. It's just a matter of him getting minutes. But right now, I don't think there's anything that really stands out from the Bulls because the minutes for the most part are just so interchangeable between these guys, and none of them are really great fantasy producers. Garrett Temple probably plays the most minutes out of the cheap guys, but he's like a 0.7 fantasy point per minute guy. Patrick Williams isn't a great producer when everyone's healthy. It's just not a very appealing spot, and it's a pretty difficult matchup. The one guy that I am interested in is Zach LaVine. I don't think you can really overstate like how good he's been this season. Amongst players with at least a 30% usage rate, he has the 4th highest true shooting percentage in the league behind Joel Embiid, Steph Curry, and Kevin Durant. Like he's been so efficient and such, so involved in this offense. His usage rate in games without Markkanen is 3 points higher than his season average as well. So again, it's a tough matchup against the Sixers. There's plenty of options to go to on this slate, but I do think that LaVine is pretty much always low owned in tournaments, just on full slates, because he's priced so close to guys that we know are stars that I'm always interested in going there just because I truly think he's a phenomenal DFS player that, just kind of doesn't have the track record that puts him in line with some of these other, top tier guys.
Yeah, he's definitely been seeing a lot of usage recently, 35% over the last 5 games. And if they do go with the lineup change, it looks like they subbed in some of their lower usage guys at halftime. So that would benefit him a little bit if Kobe White, Wendell Carter, and Patrick Williams are coming off the bench. Now, is anyone on the Bulls a priority for you other than LaVine?
No, I don't really see it. I mean, they're cheap enough. Like it wouldn't be shocking if one of them has a good game, but there's just nothing that stands out where it's like, oh, I think he's going to have a good game here. I mentioned in the deep dive article today that it's kind of disappointing that this is the matchup because Wendell Carter Jr. played 27 minutes last game and he's still pretty cheap. So I'd like to get to him before his price catches up to how many minutes he's playing now. But Joel Embiid's not really the spot where I'm looking to do that.
That's true. Carter's a pretty foul-prone center. And although you'd expect minutes to come up a little bit, working his way back from the injury, you're right. Embiid is a tough matchup, so I could easily get him in foul trouble. Now, on the Philadelphia side, unfortunately, Ben Simmons is back for this game, so we don't get to choose between Furkan Korkmaz, Tyrese Maxey, or any of those guys tonight at Thibault. So that's kind of making everyone look like about an average play, but Chicago is I'd say they're not anything special defensively. So do you see some opportunity here for the 76ers?
Yeah, just kind of disappointing price points. Embiid obviously is the one that stands out, but again, we've already talked about Jokic, we've already talked about Nikola Vucevic. Embiid's priced in between them, and then you also have good value at center. We already alluded to Hernan Gomez, so I think that it'll still be tough to get to Embiid, but that always makes him an appealing tournament option just because the ownership can't really get that high since there's so many options for people to go to. He's been great this year, averages a few less minutes per game than Vooch and Jokic, which is another knock against him though. Ben Simmons' salary's come up a little bit from the game he played without Embiid. Tobias Harris's salary has come up a little bit from the games that he played without Embiid and Simmons recently. The one salary that does stand out to me is Seth Curry on Fanduel. He's averaged about 35 minutes per game in the games without Shake Milton so far. He's not a great per minute fantasy producer, but only 4K if he's going to play 34 minutes against the Bulls. I think that's a really good price point.
I agree. 4K is ridiculous. And then Danny Green is 3,500 on FanDuel. So I have no idea what they were thinking.
Yeah.
Those seem way too low, even though these aren't the biggest fantasy producers. So on FanDuel, maybe some Green and Seth Curry. All right. On the next game, Phoenix at New Orleans. For Phoenix, pretty much everyone is healthy. So I'm not seeing a ton to get me onto the Phoenix guys, but New Orleans is a bit of a faster, younger team. So there's some good opportunity for production for the Suns. So is there anyone standing out to you in the Suns?
I really like DeAndre Ayton. It's mostly matchup based because if Steven Adams were in, I would have virtually no interest here. Ayton hasn't been great this year. He's averaged about 1.07 fantasy points per minute in the games where Paul and Booker have both been healthy. But when you're replacing Steven Adams with Guillermo Hernan-Gomez and Jackson Hayes or Melly or whoever else plays center for the Pelicans, I think it's a pretty big upgrade for Ayton, who's really cheap. He's averaged about 33.5 minutes per game over the last month. He's only 6,700 on DraftKings, I think 6,600 on Fanduel. It's not a priority in terms of, someone I plan to get in all my lineups or that I'd be playing in cash games. But I think that there's a pretty good amount of upside for Ayton here, just given the fact that he's going up against a front court that's nowhere near as intimidating defensively without Adams. As far as Paul and Booker go, obviously, they have high ceilings in a game with a massive total. The Pelicans have been really bad defensively this year. The problem is just that they cut into each other's production so much. Chris Paul loses a couple minutes on average with Booker as well, though he did play about 35 minutes last game. But he's averaged 1.15 fantasy points per minute in games where Booker has played. Booker's averaged 1.03 fantasy points per minute in games with Paul. So it just makes them a little bit less appealing, and it makes it purely secondary tournament options for me.
Agreed. Yeah, Phoenix is looking like not the greatest options. One guy that has a little bit of a nice price point on FanDuel is McCall Bridges at 5,300. And then on Super Draft, it looks like Ayton has a 1.45 multiplier, so that's somewhat intriguing. On the New Orleans side, we got to talk about Hernan-Gomez because with Steven Adams out, we're expecting Hernan-Gomez to get the start. And then they also have Jackson Hayes as kind of a draft pick that hasn't quite panned out yet, but he's lurking there. It's just that Hernan-Gomez has passed him in the rotation. So what are you expecting out of the centers for New Orleans tonight?
With the way DFS has gone this year, I'm expecting Jackson Hayes to play 40 minutes. But I think that the accurate projection is to expect 28 to 30 minutes from Willy Hernan-Gomez. The last time that Steven Adams was out, Jackson Hayes started. He played 11 minutes. Willy Hernan-Gomez played 28 or 29 minutes off the bench. And ever since then, Hernan-Gomez has been ahead of Hayes in the rotation. So there's nothing that makes me think anything changes tonight. I think it's Hernan-Gomez and then Hayes behind him, but I think it's clearly Hernan-Gomez's spot, and it's Hernan-Gomez's kind of minutes to lose. If he plays really poorly, you could easily see Jackson Hayes come in. If Hernan-Gomez is getting embarrassed by DeAndre Ayton, then you could see Hayes come in. But Hernan-Gomez is so cheap, and most importantly, he's a good per minute fantasy producer both this year and for his career, that it's just pretty difficult for him to really let you down at that salary. Like if things go poorly and he only plays 20 minutes, he probably still getting you a serviceable score for 3,900 on DraftKings, where you can roster two centers as well. So it's just pretty difficult for Hernan-Gomez to actually lose you the slate. And if you don't roster him, it's really easy for him to make it so you have no shot at winning the slate.
Definitely. Yeah. He looks like one of the safer value plays at 3,900 on DraftKings. Now, the last game that Adams was out wasn't too long ago. It was a couple of weeks. So in that game, Hernan-Gomez and Hayes didn't split the 48 minutes evenly. So I'm assuming Zion got some minutes at center, possibly. Do you think that's a possibility tonight?
Yeah, I think it is. I'm pulling it back up now to double check what the rotation was. I know it was like 30 minutes and 11 minutes.
Yeah, so that was pretty interesting because Zion, he's not a great rebounder, but if he's the center, I think that could change.
Yeah, and it was in the second half, Jackson Hayes played like 2 minutes, 3 minutes to open the half and then never came back. So Zion got the backup center minutes. His rebounding numbers haven't gone up really without Steven Adams on the floor this year, but that's still most of those minutes are with Jackson Hayes or with Hernan-Gomez. So I think you're right. If he plays center, you probably do get more, and he definitely could here. I mean, he can deal with DeAndre Ayton, but behind Ayton, you have Dario Saric too, who at times in the NBA has been a 3. So it's not like it's a true center. There's no reason Zion can't play a decent chunk of minutes at center tonight. And I think that does increase his upside, at least. Like if the rebounding numbers come up for him, that's a really big deal because we know he's going to score. We know he's going to be, it's either him or Ingram is the highest usage guy on the team in any game, basically. So the minutes are there. He's not, he projects as a decent option at his price anyway. If you do get center minutes from him, it's going to make him look even better.
Nice. And then one guy I'm looking at is Josh Hart. Josh Hart has been one of the best rebounders on the team. And if we see some more small ball lineups, I got to think that he could see more minutes. He's averaged 28 on the year, but another guy that's pretty cheap, 4,400 on DraftKings, 4,700 on Fanduel. How does he stack up for you among the value plays tonight?
Yeah, I think he's interesting as long as he's not getting a lot of ownership. Like he's not the kind of guy that if for some reason he's getting a lot of ownership, I'd want to go to. But his rebounding just goes completely overlooked, it seems like, because he's not someone that should rebound as well as he does. But he's always been a good rebounder. This year, he's got the highest rebounding percentage on the Pelicans, other than Hernangomez, Hayes, and Adams. Like he's got a higher rebounding percentage than Zion. So I think that. Plus he's someone that when he plays well, he can find his way into more minutes. There is a chance this game goes small, like you said. Like it wouldn't surprise anybody, I don't think, if the closing lineup in this game is like Lonzo, Bledsoe, Hart, Ingram, Zion, and Hart ends up playing like 34 minutes. I think that's easily in the range of outcomes, even if it's not the most likely outcome. So yeah, I do think that it's a pretty favorable price point for Josh Hart.
Nice, kind of feeling him too. We got news that Draymond Green is expected to play. Of course, we all expected him to play the other game too, and that didn't work out so well. So I'm still salty. I don't know if you can tell. All right, but okay, so the rest of the Pels, Ball and Bledsoe haven't really stood out a ton to me, and then I'm not seeing a ton other. I guess Ingram is always a great fantasy producer, does a little bit of everything. So is he someone you're going to be looking at tonight?
Not too interested there. I mean, it's not so much anything against Ingram. Like if Ingram's in your lineup and you feel good about it, go for it. But like, I think I'd rather go to Jaylen Brown at that price point. I think I would rather get my 12 points from Chris Middleton at that price point. There's just a few guys there that I think look a little bit better than Ingram.
Got a note in chat here. He says Draymond's a great defender. Last game, Vooch only put up 40 against him. So next game we got is Detroit at Memphis. And if you guys tune into the tip-off show, you might have caught Greg's slander of the Pistons. Adam, I gotta get your take, man. Like they've moved on from Blake Griffin. I'm like, maybe they got some young talent here, but Greg didn't think so. How are you feeling about the Pistons?
Not a real big fan of the Pistons. I mean, I'm glad they're in the league because it makes me feel better about the Wizards.
Damn, I'm feeling bad about this jersey match I got of the Killian Hayes jerseys. So, unfortunately, the NFT wasn't available for that one. But they do have some good fantasy players, and Memphis is a weak team that this game should be a better chance for the Pistons to succeed. So, especially on Super Draft, these guys have ridiculous multipliers. Like Wright, Grant, and Mason Plumlee are all some top plays over there. But DraftKings and FanDuel, they're cheap as well. Delon Wright and Jeremy Grant seem like the primary guys that will benefit from Blake Griffin being kind of in this purgatory right now. So Blake was distributing the ball a good amount, and Jeremy Grant and Delon Wright are the other guys the offense runs through. So I'm thinking they have some good potential. And then Saddiq Bey is their rookie that has been starting in place of Blake, and he won the Eastern Conference Player of the Week for all the players last week, so that was pretty impressive. How are you feeling about these Pistons?
I think this game has the potential to be like an absolutely awful game to watch, an absolutely awful basketball game, and a game that has a lot of fantasy points. I think Griffin and Wright both look good. Like you said, they benefit with Griffin out. And also Derrick Rose. Delon Wright's averaged about 35 minutes per game without Derrick Rose this year. He's averaged 1 fantasy point per minute without Rose or Griffin. Jeremy Grant without Griffin on the floor has about a 28% usage rate. He averages about 1.15 fantasy points per minute, and he leads this team in minutes per game. So both of those guys look good. I would throw Jeremy Grant out as another guy who I like at his price a little bit more than I like Brandon Ingram from that previous game. Mason Plumlee also, he's going to be really, really difficult to get to at center, but his rates go up across the board without Blake Griffin. You mentioned Blake having a role as a facilitator. Mason Plumlee is a good passing big, and he gets more assist opportunities without Blake Griffin. He gets more usage and more rebounds as well, and he's averaged about 34 minutes per game without Jahlil Okafor this year, which, while it sounds trivial, there have been enough games where the Pistons go to a 3-center rotation when Okafor's in that it hurts Plumlee's minutes projection. But without Okafor, that the center minutes are essentially going to Plumlee and Stewart, and there's a much better chance that you get mid-30s from Plumlee. So all three of these guys I think look good. I think it'll be a lot easier to get Grant and Wright into lineups. But Plumlee also, if you're playing a lot of large field tournament lineups, does have the ability to outperform a $6,800 price tag pretty easily.
Agreed. Yeah, Plumlee's had some big games this season, and I do think that Jahlil Okafor being out is underrated for him. Now the other guys, I'm gonna skip over. They don't look like great values tonight. Sadiq Bey, his price has gone up a ton, so I'm not really feeling him. And then Sekou Doumbouya is back tonight, so I'm like not exactly sure how these minutes are gonna shake out. But on the Memphis side, we got some interesting injuries going on here. So Melton is questionable tonight. He's missed a few games here. And then we have Dylan Brooks is questionable. And that could create some big minutes for someone on the Grizzlies here. So what are you thinking with this Grizzlies injury situation?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of a bigger deal than it probably will get credit for because, it's the Grizzlies. But Dylan Brooks has a 26% usage rate this year. So if he's in, you have a guy that is going to chuck up shots against a bad Pistons team, certainly could, have a big game. But if he's out, it's opening up minutes. My guess is that either Desmond Bane would start or Brandon Clark would move back into the starting lineup with Grayson Allen sliding into Brooks' spot. But it also would open up usage and not that Ja Morant or Valanciunas need increased usage, but it certainly wouldn't hurt them getting more shots up without Dylan Brooks out there. If you've watched Memphis games, that there's if you've rostered Morant or Valanciunas and then watched a Memphis game, there's a lot of possessions that end with Dylan Brooks that are pretty disappointing. So I think it would help both of those guys. It would make both of their ceilings higher. It would also open up more offensive opportunities for Grayson Allen and Kyle Anderson. But I think that mostly it would just make Morant and Valanciunas even better plays.
Nice. Yeah, I think Morant and Valanciunas could definitely benefit being the guys that are taking the shots. And then Bane, he's started a couple games and seen some decent minutes, so that's pretty intriguing. What about if Brooks plays? How are you feeling about Ja Morant and Valanciunas?
Yeah, I like them both, even if Brooks is in. We've finally been getting good rotations for DFS from Memphis. They'd been really frustrating for a lot of the year, just playing their starters 30, 31 minutes. But we're seeing Morant pretty regularly in competitive games get 33 plus. Valanciunas played another 28 last game despite some foul trouble. I think that you're probably getting, 28 is a pretty safe bet here based on recent rotations. And both of these guys are obviously really good on a per minute basis. The matchup's good against Detroit. So I like both of them. I think that they're both just underpriced because you had Memphis sort of slowly bring guys back after their COVID layoff. And it seems like that's still holding their prices down a little bit.
Definitely. Yeah, Valanciunas looks especially enticing with this price point. All right, guys. We have a lot of different options as far as premium memberships on Awesemo, and you get everything you need pretty much to win money on these tournaments. You're using the same info as me, the projections, ownership, and then the range of outcomes that really help you gain an edge. So you can get the weekly pass for all sports for $30 or for NBA for $17. So make sure, if you haven't signed up for our package yet, make sure to try it out. I'm sure you'll be able to find a lot to improve your process. Also, if you are into podcasts, we have a lot of our shows on the podcast network. So make sure to sub to us on there. Our Live Before Lock shows aren't on it, but everything else is. So we also have a giveaway with that. So hit up awesemo.com/podcast. And if you leave a 5-star review, you can win a free month of Awesemo Platinum. All right. Next game we got Oklahoma City at Milwaukee. And Oklahoma City's probably a little bit outgunned here, but they've got their key players back for the most part, aside from George Hill. So Al Horford rested last game. He's back. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is at full strength. I don't really see a lot here until some prices come down, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a pretty big talent in the NBA right now. So I can see playing him as a GPP play. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think as a whole, OKC is probably the least appealing team on the slate as far as finding guys that I'm interested in. If for some reason I have to play someone from OKC, like I don't know if I'm playing Giannis and Middleton and I want a run back, I think Gilgeous-Alexander is clearly the top option here. Everyone else, they're all priced up because they've run such a short rotation. They've been so shorthanded for so long. But then last game you had a 10-man rotation. Now you have Al Horford back as well. So when you're talking about the secondary options on Oklahoma City that aren't the best per minute players, or that were benefiting because there were no point guards for a while, that's not the case anymore. So they're pretty clearly overpriced. Gilgeous-Alexander, at least, is the clear number one option on this offense. Assuming the game's competitive, you're probably getting 34, 35 minutes out of him. And if this game's competitive, he's probably playing well. So he's the one guy where I think you can at least get him into lineups. It's still not a priority, but if I'm going to OKC, it's Gilgeous-Alexander.
Awesome. Do you see anyone else you'd be interested in? Maybe like Beasley, Al Horford? I mean, probably
it's just like if I name any of these guys, there's so many other people at their positions or price points that I like more. Like I'd rather go to Mason Plumlee. I'd rather go to DeAndre Ayton. I'd rather go to Joe Val. And they're all within $300 of Horford.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now on the Milwaukee side, I have a feeling we'll find a little bit more value here. Drew Holiday continues to be out, so that's kind of opened up a little bit of assists and usage for other players. In particular, Chris Middleton seems to have benefited, as well as Bryn Forbes and Augustine getting some more minutes. So who are you starting with on the Bucks tonight?
Giannis, as always, there's a lot of blowout potential here, and I think maybe that will scare some people away. But we still have, Giannis projected for 25% ownership. I think that it's just a spot where, with Holiday out too, if the Bucks do blow out Oklahoma City, there's just such a high likelihood that it means Giannis had a really big game in 3 quarters that I'm not overly concerned about it. And since you can roster him at forward instead of center, it makes it a little bit easier to get him into lineups. So obviously I like him a lot here in a good matchup. Chris Middleton, absolutely awful in both games against Toronto. Really, really disappointing. Hasn't really had a big game with Drew out, but at the very least, his ceiling is higher. He's playing minutes still without Giannis on the floor, where he's dominating touches, he's dominating usage, he's dominating assists. This is obviously an easier matchup than Toronto was. So given that Middleton's salary hasn't increased, the reason I think that he still looks like a good option, regardless of what happened with Toronto, is even if Drew Holiday were in, Chris Middleton's averaged about 1.15 fantasy points per minute this year. If he gets 34, 35 minutes, which is where he gets in competitive games, he would project as a good option here. At the very least, the ceiling is higher with Holiday out. So I still think Middleton's a good option, really, until his price increases.
Agreed. Yeah, he looks like one of the better options on the slate, especially given the price point being a little bit easier to get to than some other guys. And of course, Giannis is always a great place, so that doesn't even need to be said. But versus Oklahoma City, especially good. Also, throw out the spread on this game is only 10.5. This isn't nearly as ridiculously uncompetitive as a lot of games in the NBA. So I have it at about 17% chance of a blowout.
And Milwaukee's been terrible defending recently, so that helps too.
Fair enough. So what about other guys on the Bucks? What about maybe Brook Lopez, Augustine, Forbes, or DiVincenzo? Any interest?
Yeah, I think more of the large field tournament plays for me, just because on average they're not really that great. I don't think that on average anyone on this team other than Giannis or Middleton plays more than 30 minutes, but they're also at price points where, if Bobby Portis for one reason or another gets to 27 minutes, he's a good enough per minute player that he probably has a good game for 5,200. DiVincenzo could get around 30 minutes and is a decent fantasy producer. I think he's priced pretty appropriately. 4,200 for Brook Lopez. His playing time has been down a bit recently. But if he were to get back to where he was playing 30 minutes a night not too long ago, then he would project as a good option, but you have to use the center position for him as well. So I think it's really difficult to prioritize anything, but sort of just, dart throw type guys on the non-Giannis and Middleton plays.
Agreed, yeah. Especially with some good value on the slate. These guys don't stand out nearly as much. Toronto versus Minnesota. Minnesota is another one of those young teams that is pretty easy to beat up on. And Kyle Lowry is questionable tonight. So that's going to be a pivotal spot, given that this game doesn't start until 9 p.m. Eastern, where we're going to have to make some decisions, not really knowing what's going on with Lowry. So what's the latest on Lowry, and how is that going to affect your strategy tonight?
So they had said yesterday that he was unlikely to play today. They said today that he's questionable. If I have to guess, my guess is that he doesn't play, but I actually think that from the lineup building process, it might be better to assume that he does play. And the reason is that if you make lineups and you happen to get to Lowry and he's ruled out, it's pretty easy to move stuff around, and you can find plenty of guys at his price point that look good. If you assume Lowry doesn't play, you're going to get $3,100 DeAndre Bembry, basically without question. He played 36 minutes last night as a starter in place of Lowry. If we get news at, let's say, 8 o'clock that Lowry's starting, you're stuck with this $3,100 Bembry in your lineup, who you can't really do anything with it. And on top of that, it's not like he's like he projects as a good point per dollar play, but it's not like he's a fantastic raw scorer. So like if you project Lowry in and you end up using value from earlier games and you don't get to DeAndre Bembry, it's not the end of the world. If Lowry plays also on DraftKings at 6,700, he looks like a great option. So I just think there's a lot more. It's going to be a lot easier to swap stuff around if you're going from Lowry to other guys than from like Bembry to other guys. And I think that there's also just more like tournament winning potential from having a low owned Kyle Lowry at this salary than there is from dealing with DeAndre Bembry.
Yeah, that's definitely intriguing with Kyle Lowry's salary being down a good amount. So this is weird with him. Nurse saying that he wasn't expected to play yesterday. Then today, the injury report came out and he's questionable. So a little bit tough to break that down. Have
you seen a quote or just the injury report?
Just the injury report.
Yeah, that's all I've seen too. I wish we had a quote, because like the injury report could just be as simple as they just listed him as questionable and they're not expecting him to play. But so I wish we had a quote like Nurse actually saying that he could play, but I don't know.
Yeah, let me look on Twitter real quick. So maybe we can find something. But I do think that one strategy you can use is just boosting Van Vliet and Siakam a little bit, who should benefit with Lowry being out of the lineup and being replaced by Bembry, because Bembry is a very low usage guy. And people were talking about on the strategy show this morning, he only had like a 5% usage last night or something.
Yeah. I had him in all three of my 3 max lineups, and I knew he had like 15 points. And when I looked at Popcorn Machine today, I couldn't believe he'd actually played 36 minutes.
Yeah, that was wild. A little bit tilting, but there weren't any value plays that really were amazing aside from Bielitsa last night. So it was a little tough slate for value. But let's look at Siakam and Van Vliet. How are you going to handle? Oh, you just got Terry McBride DMing me in Slack here, giving us the assist. He said it's not good, obviously, because he's not playing. I think he'll probably keep him out here for these two for sure. Then we'll probably have a little better idea. Nurse said yesterday. So that's making me think maybe he's less likely to play than to play.
Yeah, like that's my read on it. Like I still think it's unlikely he plays, but it's also Kyle Lowry. I could see where he just kind of talks his way in.
That's a good point. Yeah. So any other guys on the Raptors you're looking at? OJ Anunoby working his way back from the injury. Boucher is always a tantalizing option, but his salary is a little bit high. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I still like Van Vliet and I like Siakam, because even if Lowry plays, those guys are going to be good options against a weak Minnesota team. But as you were saying, if Lowry sits and he's replaced by a low usage guy in Bembry, they're going to look even better. Van Vliet, since last year, Van Vliet's averaged more fantasy points per minute in the games without Lowry than with him. Overall, his production this year has come up as well. But you're also seeing Pascal Siakam get more minutes at center now, which is nice. The last couple of games he's started there. Since Anunoby came back, he's been starting at center with Aaron Baines going to the bench. And then Toronto's been running a weird rotation where Boucher plays alongside Baines off the bench. But that's beside the point. Pascal Siakam this year, without any of the other centers on the floor, has averaged 1.25 fantasy points per minute. Overall, he's only averaged about 1.13 fantasy points per minute. So you can see that the production increases as you would expect it to. Karl Anthony Towns has actually been playing well defensively since coming back. But, if you're going to get I think, especially on DraftKings, an already underpriced Siakam, potentially without Lowry, and then potentially playing center, it ends up setting up as a really, really good forward option.
I'm trying to run some numbers here with Lowry out. It gives Fred VanVleet about a 2-point boost and Siakam about 3. And then I'm really torn about Bembry because I feel like he's such a good option given the rotation last night. So one thing you can do is if you play Bembry, you want to have at least 2 guys from the Toronto and Minnesota plus Clippers at Utah game. It sucks because the last game tonight isn't very good for fantasy right now, but that'll give you the flexibility to swap around. So that might be a strategy I use. You can also do that in Fantasy Cruncher with their groups. So you can say if you have Bembry, you need at least two more players from the last 2 games. So that would be a way to get him in there, but not hamstring yourself if Lowry plays.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then also with the Utah game, it's not very appealing, but there's very likely to be a lot of late swapping going on with that game too. So it'll all just kind of sort itself out.
That's a good point. With Minnesota, they pulled a fast one yesterday a couple of days ago because Malik Beasley, he was late or something like that. And then he got benched for Jaden McDaniels, who played 37 minutes. It was an overtime game. He played all 5 overtime, 32 in regulation. And Jaden McDaniels, he was like an end of the first round pick, I think. But he's gotten steady run. And I'm kind of wondering, like, did he earn himself some more minutes last night or the other night by playing well? But it's hard to predict. So what did you make of McDaniels?
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that we just kind of see what we've been seeing from him. Ryan Saunders has been talking up McDaniels and saying he likes him for a while, and he's had a pretty steady rotation spot. But I'm not expecting him to get 32 minutes in regulation again. Obviously he got that one extra stint in the first half. He closed over Vanderbilt after Vanderbilt picked up a couple of fouls, and then he played in overtime over him. So maybe he plays more here, but I don't really feel confident giving him those minutes.
Yeah, it's he's a little shaky value. He's 3,300 though. The other value guy here is Jared Vanderbilt, who's been starting at power forward. He had played a bunch of center earlier in the year, so it's tough to exactly know how this will affect his numbers playing next to Towns. Any interest in Vanderbilt?
A little bit, just because the playing time's been so volatile, it's keeping his salary down. In the games that he has started, or most recently alongside Towns, he played 22 minutes in a game where he was in foul trouble and had kind of a weird rotation. Then in a game where he wasn't in foul trouble, he played about 30 minutes. And then last game, he played like 18 minutes. And like you were just saying, you had McDaniels play over him. He's averaged about 0.8 fantasy points per minute alongside Towns. So that has hurt his production, as you would expect. So it's not a spot where I'm really confident, but at 4,100, he is cheap enough where in tournaments, I don't mind, taking a shot on him.
Nice. Yeah, I agree. Nice little value play in Vanderbilt. Pretty steady role on the team. A little foul prone, but what about the other guys? Cat, Anthony Edwards, Malik Beasley. What are you making of them?
Kind of just neutral on all of them. In general, I like the salary on Towns because I just think that as time goes on, it's going to go up from this point. The minutes have been nice since coming back, playing 32, 33 minutes a night. The production's been down a little bit in the 5 games since he's come back, but you'll probably see that go up sooner than later. Not a great matchup though against Toronto, and again, just a center slate where there's a lot of options that I like as always. Malik Beasley, about a 25% usage rate since last year alongside Towns without Russell. He's a little bit more expensive than I would like. Anthony Edwards has averaged just shy of a fantasy point per minute since Towns came back. He's averaging about 34 minutes per game in those games without Russell. At 6K on DraftKings with small forward eligibility, I think it's kind of an interesting tournament option. Like if you can't get up to that Jaylen Brown, Chris Middleton, Jeremy Grant range, I think 6K for Edwards, you at least have a pretty nice ceiling for someone at that price point. But it's not a great matchup, and he is still pretty raw.
So we got some big news coming through here. Ben Simmons is game time decision, and he missed shoot around. I tend to think that means he's less likely to play than to play. But I mean, why are we just getting this news now? Shoot around happened like this morning, probably. So
it seems like we never get shoot around news anymore. Like years ago, you should just get like nothing but shoot around news.
Yeah, and this is actually pretty handy information because I do feel like it's more likely Simmons does not play again today than he does play. Now, last game, it seemed to only really benefit Matisse Thybulle as far as minutes. We were kind of anticipating maybe Korkmaz or Tyrese Maxey would benefit, but then Isaiah Joe kind of joined the rotation, and Thybulle got more of the run. So those were where the minutes went. What do you expect to happen tonight?
Yeah, I think that to some extent it will kind of depend on who's playing well, but I'd go with what we saw last time. The one thing, Tyrese Maxey, we kind of thought that with Milton also being out that he would get more run, but Doc Rivers has kind of had quotes recently saying like he thinks Maxey is good. He also just doesn't think Maxey's a rotation player right now. So it seems like he's kind of going out of his way to not play him a ton of minutes. I think it would make Curry look even better. I mean, he played 37 minutes. We already said that he looked like a really good option. But it also, I think, would make Tobias Harris look better, and it would make Embiid look a little bit better as well.
I agree. Yeah, Tobias Harris has been balling out with Embiid and Simmons both missing games, so he's a pretty good option. Embiid, super expensive, but pretty solid. Let's go to the Clippers game. We only got 3 minutes left before lock, followed by money time. Now, Paul George and Kawhi are questionable, so that makes it tough to love any Clippers because basically everyone's price has gone up except Kawhi and Paul George. So Lou Williams has been a big beneficiary where both have been out, but it's hard to judge the percentage chance that both will be out tonight versus one of them playing or both playing. So how are you playing this one?
Yeah, and it's a tough matchup with Utah, and you also have Batum questionable and Luke Kennard questionable. So like if Kawhi and George are in, I don't like anyone on this team. If George is out and Kawhi is in, Kawhi is fine, but I'm not like going out of my way to save a roster spot for him anyway. It's a tough matchup with Utah. If they're both out, then Lou Williams gets a lot more usage, but there's still plenty of guard options on this slate. If Batum and Kennard are out, you're probably getting 32 plus minutes from Morris again. You're probably getting around 30 minutes from Terrence Mann, but their prices have just kind of all come up enough to where that combined with the matchup, like when we get news, obviously I'll recrunch and adjust for that news, but I'm not too concerned about it just because if I end up not being able to get to a really bad Clippers player against the Jazz, I think I'll live.
Yeah, that sounds fair to me. Now, is there anyone on the Clippers side that you'd feel confident in regardless? Ibaka looks somewhat intriguing, but his role hasn't been that exciting this year.
No, I don't really see anything. I mean, Zubac's salary came down a little bit too, which is weird, but he's been stealing minutes from Ibaka so often that it makes it really tough to trust either guy.
Now, on the Utah side, Mike Conley is questionable. The Jazz, it seems are a little bit cagey with these injuries. It's hard to know exactly what this means, given that he's missed a lot of games. But I don't feel strong enough about the other guys to really play this as if he's out, rather than just fade the team entirely. So what are you doing with Conley news?
Yeah, doing basically the same thing as I am with the Clippers. If Conley is out, I think I'm more likely to get to Utah. Like that's a spot that I actually like, because Mitchell does produce a lot better without Conley. Clarkson gets more minutes. Rudy Gobert is a reasonable play one way or the other. But just in the context of the slate, I'm not going to put myself in a position where I assume Conley's out and then Conley plays and I end up with, an overpriced Donovan Mitchell or Clarkson, because they're clearly at price points now where you want Conley to be out if you're going to roster them. So I think that when we get that news, it's likely that Utah guys start to like move into my late swaps, but I'm not really going out of my way to save anything from this game.
Fair enough. Yeah, this one looks like the least exciting, but I'm feeling I'm going to have these guys in Showdown at least, so that will be fun to get a little piece of it. All right, guys, stay tuned. We got Spags and Terry following us up here on Live Before Lock, taking you all the way up till 7:30 p.m., breaking down all the news and then doing some super draft analysis. So stay tuned. Thanks, guys, for watching, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the Deeper Dive.
this Simmons news. At least Draymond Green will know on the show, I hope.
The Simmons was a nice curveball 2 minutes before jumping on the show.
I just like it's so exhausting. Look, just give me the news at 3 p.m. like my time, then we're done.
Just a little nice, gentle lead in. One of these days, it'll happen.
Dare to dream.
I'm just slowly starting to wish I hadn't had a Hot Pocket right before the show.
What flavor Hot Pocket?
The cheesesteak one.
Oh, I used to have those a lot in college. I enjoy it. I wish it sounded
Brought me
like
back. Really brought me back like that.
Count it down. What is up, guys? It is time. You've got 1 hour left to lock on Draftkings and Fanduel. As you might know by now, the NBA never ends, so we have another half hour afterwards. We'll be talking a lot of Super Draft. The show is sponsored by Super Draft. We'll also be giving you all the late breaking news that's eventually going to come and ruin all of Terry's and my lineups. But let's get into it. I'm Chris Spags, joined by a man who is my personal good luck charm, a man responsible for all of our customer success at Awesemo. He's a man also fantastic at DFS. He's going to walk you through today's slate. He's Terry McBride. How are you doing, Terry?
Well, that's a big windup. I got to deliver now.
You got the Hot Pockets. I feel like I had to balance it out by where you had you had a very light meal, very light Hot Pocket based meal, and now I got to fill you up with compliments.
Love it. Good approach. Yeah, doing good. Been a hectic, busy Friday. Didn't get much sleep, but yeah, hanging in there, man. How about you?
I'm feeling good. And you know what, Terry? I, too, had some sleepless nights because I was thinking all day and night long about the $50,000 NBA jump shot going on over at Super Draft with $10,000 going to first. And I want to make sure everybody gets their entries in here. That one locked at 7:30 Eastern time. So the first 2 games on the slate won't be available on Super Draft, but we will give you guys basically all the top projected plays on Super Draft, according to Awesemo's projections throughout that back half hour of the show, in addition to all the breaking news. So hang on, play on Super Draft, use the promo code Awesemo21 on there, because they'll get you $50 free when you deposit $50 or more. Go to superdraft.io or download Superdraft the App Store. Use that promo code Awesemo21 when you are creating your account, and that is the way that you'll get that $50 when you deposit yours. So go play on Superdraft today, and stay tuned for the Superdraft show, where we'll talk about the news, we'll get mad at things and ruining all of our lineups, and we'll give you guys the top projected plays on Superdraft. And we got one super chat coming in already from GTS Club, trying to get the news right away, saying Pistons Hawks parlay, money line or under for NBA. Terry, you want to do some betting here? We have the best odds data as well at oddshopper.awesemo.com. So how would you be feeling about a Pistons Hawks parlay? And I'll give you a little bit lean here. I like the Pistons generally. I don't know if I like them to win, but I like them for DFS.
Okay, for DFS, I guess I can get behind that a little bit. If you were going to say like nice guys, yeah, sure, maybe, big, tall, good-looking fellas, sure, fine, whatever. But as a basketball team to win this game, I don't know. Not sure I like it. Just going over to OddShopper, like you mentioned, though. Let's take a look at what we got here. Down. Pistons are 4.5-point dogs across the board. Going up against that Grizzly, yeah, I don't love it. I think there's just too much of trying to work in some of the kids, really just get away from the old veterans. They got D Rose out of town, Blake's out of the rotation and everything, not having to rely on them. So a lot of young kids just kind of learn how to play in the NBA together and really getting their feet under them. A couple good veterans in that lineup, but if I was making a bet, dangling over a pit of Vipers, betting my life on it, I don't know that I would lean onto the Detroit side on that one, even with the points.
I think that's fair. Memphis has been running a little better, and Detroit, I agree, could not hold up their side of the bet, though Atlanta as well. Honestly, Boston, I think we saw the other day, Jason Tatum's not going to be as good, I think, in this spot today, with Kemba Walker being back, stealing some possessions away, as Kemba being in a lineup will do. But I do think overall, Boston should have better days coming up, and I think putting a beating on Atlanta today wouldn't be surprising. So overall in that parlay, not feeling fantastic about it, but as always, it's your money. You got to spend it the way you do. We'll give you the advice. We'll give you guys what we think about it. But at the end of the day, you're making the choices for your bets and your lineups, and we hope you guys win more than lose. Tyler Sappington also with the super chat. Thank you for that. Michael Carter Williams is flooding his crunches. What are you guys getting to for him? I will tell you that right now, because I actually was getting a lot of him too. Don't feel the most comfortable with it. I kind of feel like maybe it might be worth knocking his rates down, but he is still going to be seeing a good amount of minutes. Awesemo has him for 29, and I actually am going to have him 3x the field on DraftKings. So Terry, how do you feel about MCW on both DraftKings and FanDuel?
Not having crunched anything yet, waiting on some emerging news. I am expecting to have quite a bit of him on FanDuel. He's one of Alex's bigger plays on the board in terms of optimal lineup appearance rate. Should be getting the bulk of the minutes running that offense with most of their the rest of their team out, most of their ball handlers out still. Really like Vuk in that game as well. Definitely think he's very much on the board. A couple of the role players, the shooters on that team too, but I definitely expect, unless things change pretty dramatically between here and lock, to have a lot of MCW on FanDuel. And I think it lines up just as well over on DraftKings. It looked really good.
Yeah, I worry a little bit about MCW just because, and we could talk about this game. It's one of the early games here that won't be on Super Draft slate, so we can get some of the finer points out of the way. In addition to the Draymond Green news, as me and our pal Greg Ehrenberg have discussed a lot recently, including on the Late Slate Swap and Sweat show, the L3S, we call it to sound more like a Lexus vehicle.
We're abbreviating it now.
Huh? It's got to get easier at some point, Terry. It's not getting easier the more I say it. So the L3S, but we were talking about Draymond Green, who was a thorn in our side, resulted in some angry tweets at Greg, as if we would somehow know that Draymond Green got ruled out 2 minutes after lock and killed both mine and Greg's lineups that night. But he is expected to be playing, even though he's still a game time decision. Got those news items coming out at the same time, so we could talk about Draymond in a second. But MCW, I think I have concern that just the assist rate comes down a little bit more with Fournier, who has been more of a playmaker previously when there wasn't Markelle Fultz on the floor. We don't have enough of a sample size of Fournier without Cole Anthony and without Fultz. It just doesn't exist because of all these guys being injured in and out of the lineups. But I'm curious if Fournier drags away from Carter Williams, or if it's vice versa, where we see Fournier, maybe the usage is still there. I think he's probably putting him in for 25 to 27% usage, depending on the situation, feels about right. But assist upside there, he's been, a 27% assist rate guy without Fultz and Gordon on the floor. And I'm wondering, Terry, if you had to pick here, who gets dragged down a bit more by just having to share the court time? Do you think Fournier or Carter Williams takes the bigger hit?
I think they can kind of coexist. I think the assists do probably come down a little bit for MCW, just deferring to the better and more veteran player, just as these guys tend to do a little bit. So I think the touches tend toward Fournier's direction, so he might get a little bit more usage, or he might dish off of those looks and pick up some more of the assist percentage. Where I think you can get away with it, though, is MCW tends to pick up points in other ways as well. Does a little bit of rebounding, picks up occasional steals, a little block here and there. So I think he's a kind of guy that doesn't rely on point scoring by any means. I think you can kind of get there just kind of piecing it together with him, even if we do see the assists tick down a little bit. He's only been 0.77 fantasy points per minute so far this year, but it's been in, mostly in the lesser role than this. So I think we'll see him get up, trending toward that, fantasy point per minute number. He was at that mark last year, so I think he's got that in him. And for 4,500, he doesn't even need to give us that tonight. So I think there's plenty of room to play them both if you wanted to. And I'm not going to really sweat, if we lose a couple points off the assist rate, or if he picks up a couple. I don't think it's going to push us too far in any direction.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's about right for me. And I guess it's, different tales on FanDuel and DraftKings always as well. But yeah, 48 to me, I'm going to have a good amount of right now. And this is something I'm a little bit terrified of, because if I have Fournier in lineups now, if I have Carter Williams in lineups now, if there is Sixers value opened up by Ben Simmons, who was a game time decision, who wasn't at shoot around today, and maybe seems like he's trending a little bit closer to not playing than to playing, I'm a little worried that I'm going to have a lot of ownership tied up into an Orlando game that maybe isn't that appealing. But Kem Birch starting, I think, makes me feel comfortable enough about these guys where I'm probably going to ride it out. We'll see if it changes during the show. Terry, you mentioned Vooch, though. Let's just talk about him fast, because he has been a big beneficiary of all the guys being out, but also, has had some down games too, because there's just nobody to take the pressure off of him in these games. In this spot, Terry, Vooch, I think, was a guy I had earlier today a lot more, and he's come down a bit more. I'm getting more Jokic now, getting more Willie Hernangomez, who's going to be the chalk play of the day on DraftKings. How are you feeling about Vooch?
I still like Vooch, particularly FanDuel-wise. I think you're getting very good leverage on him, at least based on this last update that we've got. I've still got him coming up as hitting his target score significantly more frequently than the ownership. And going by Alex's optimal lineup appearance rate, we're getting out well ahead of the field in terms of how frequently he comes up in that. Jokic was leading him earlier. I expect that difference is still there. He's probably stripped a little bit further ahead of him, just because we've had some value open up, so it'll be a little bit easier to get Jokic in your lineup. Vooch is definitely a little bit less expensive and was trending as almost as good an option. So if you need to save whatever the difference is, I don't have them both in front of me, but it was like a 900 or 800 or something like that on FanDuel. So if you need to save some money, I think it's a very good alternative, and you're picking up a heck of a lot of leverage just by making that pivot. So there's two very good reasons to look from Jokic down to Vucevic without really sacrificing very much.
And Draymond Green, how are you handling him today with, the hope that he's going to be in there? And I think it's worth pointing out, as I try to do a lot whenever Draymond's been on a slate. And unfortunately, the other day pointing that out, I ended up blowing up in my face, and I guess potentially anybody who might have listened and jumped on the Draymond train with me. But Draymond, the rates go up so much without Looney and Wiseman out there. And, to the point where he actually damages Steph's assist rate a bit, does cut a little bit away in terms of rebounding for some of the other guys. But really, to me, he looks like a fantastic play if he's going to be in, especially with the Q tag probably driving him down. At Awesemo, we have him at under 10% ownership right now. We'll see how that changes over the next hour. But how do you feel about Draymond in this spot? Are you willing to go there? Because I feel like, a guy who people were down on after he just cost a lot of money, myself included, that always is something that people do shy away from. And I still think he's a fantastic play on his face.
Yeah, and look, I think just because he's still questionable and just because we don't know, 45 minutes or whatever it is before lock, I think to your point, that's going to take him out of some people's lineup who might otherwise have rostered him just because of that lack of confidence in whether or not he's going to go. They don't want to get burnt again. They're a little bit gun shy on it. I like to play a lot better on DraftKings on your site than on mine. 7,600 as a power forward only. There are I'm going to say a dozen, maybe more options above him, just sorted by Alex's optimal lineup rate at the position, both above and below him in salary. So I don't think he's mandatory on Fanduel. If you want to mix and match him into a couple, fine, but he's definitely not standing out. On DraftKings, significantly less expensive. You get him at the power forward or the center spot, much more improved optimal lineup rate, slots right in there alongside some of the top end plays on the board. So a little bit below the very, very top, but you gain a little bit of leverage on some of those guys and you gain some salary on some of those guys by playing them, and you can mix and match them together, rotate them around through those different positions. So I like what he does for you on DK.
Also, we got some news here on the Cavs. Cedi Osman's going to be starting. Let's talk about that in a second here. But first of all, we got about 17 minutes left till the halfway point of the show. And if you're a regular here on the channel, you'll know by now. If you're new here, you learn for the first time that if you guys get us to 1,000 likes by the halfway point of the show, we'll give away the top 5 projected owned plays on DraftKings and FanDuel according to our Awesemo ownership projections. So smash that like button now. It helps us get seen by more people, helps the channel grow. All those things are good for us and for you guys. You get free ownership that you can always pay for yourself, of course, at awesemo.com/join. If you want to know the top 5 owned plays on DraftKings and FanDuel, smash that like button now. Get us to a respectable 33% hit rate. We'll give you guys those coming up in a little bit, and I'll flip my hat because that's what the people are here for. Me flipping a hat, and at least so there's probably some niche fetishists out there that are into it, I would think.
Yeah, at least half the audience is just watching on mute, waiting for that moment. They don't care about the FS.
And Matthew Reiner in the YouTube chat saying, need to get Engelman now how to get those likes up, Spags. Yeah, he is. Josh is the like pro, but I think we need to democratize likes here. And, we do have Terry here who, when Josh had his hair longer, Terry looked like his dad. So you got to support the V1 version of Josh, the guy who really brought it first. So hit the like button for Terry and just pretend he's Josh. If you squint your eyes, you could feel like Terry could be passing maybe. Maybe. Let's keep going through here, Terry. And I think let's talk about the other early game because we might as well. Nikola Jokic, we just got news that Will Barton will be playing in this game. So that's interesting. No Gary Harris for this one. Still no Paul Millsap for this one. Really, Michael Porter Jr., we've talked a lot about him recently, but today for me, not a guy I consider to be a must-have on DraftKings, but Jokic, a play that I will be double the field on. I feel really good about him. The numbers look great. Obviously playing against Cleveland, certainly not going to be an inhibitor, though you can argue playing against Jared Allen's going to be a little bit tougher than playing against Andre Drummond would it be. But I think this game, Terry, has some interesting wrinkles, some guys that are going to be pretty chalky. Darius Garland, also going to be pretty highly owned. Cedi, people are going to be curious about. How are you feeling about this game and who's really jumping out, whether it be on Denver's side or Cleveland's?
Yeah, Cedi was a piece of chalk that was definitely standing out on the board. He's significantly owned on FanDuel. We're pushing 50% at this point, probably in the next update, especially with the news that he's definitely starting. We had him as in most of the day, so the numbers are accurate, but I expect that's going to go up. If he's at that rate, that's going to be a tough ask. I like getting to Cedi when he looks like he's in position to get a lot of minutes, not an expensive price, and potentially be a really key building block on the slate, which the board does look like today. It's just a really tough ask. He's got a negative 22.3 leverage score in Alex's metric. He's going to be owned double the amount that he's going to be in your optimal lineups. That's the point at which I start to maybe start considering getting away from some of this chalk. The question is, where do we go for, a $4,200 replacement at small forward, or can we find enough value elsewhere? Because he does look like a spectacular play from a boom score percentage, from an optimal lineup rate. He looks pretty good. On DraftKings, much improved, still overowned. Negative 13.5 on his leverage score, but the opportunities there, 4,800 small forward and power forward, which I think is would put him over the top to probably get him into my lineups, and probably end up with him maybe around the field, maybe a little bit under on DK. But I like him better on DK. He's going to come up in my process, and it's going to be a decision for me, which I hate. I do not like getting to that decision. I like when my process works smoothly, but he's definitely going to be a big monkey wrench in this tonight.
Jacob Kimball asking, does MPJ go to the bench? No, because Gary Harris is out. You'll probably see Barton just take that spot and keep the same group there. They had last game, they started, let's see, I this in front of me, Jamal Murray, Jokic, Porter Jr., JaMychal Green, and Gary Harris. So I would think JaMychal keeps starting here, though, you never know. Hopefully we'll get the news soon enough. But I would see, Terry, I don't think you have any reason either to believe differently, right? It's Barton for Harris.
Yeah, I would think.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. Yeah.
That should be it, but we'll keep our eyes peeled there. If anything comes across, we will pass it along to you guys. And of course, our guy News God as well in the chat. Whenever there is news here, he's bringing it on the premium Slack or here on YouTube as well, depending upon whatever he's got going on. He's a busy man. Anything else in the premium Slack here? It's really Meat Lane saying, is it me or does Steph not really exist on the slate? Because I haven't heard anyone really speak on him against this terrible Orlando defense. I'll trust projections, but I see him as a sleeper. I think he's a better play. And we saw this kind of happen the other night against Miami. And I think it wasn't, maybe not as a perfect analogy, but Curry did look more productive in that game because Draymond, to me, takes enough possessions away from Steph that I think he makes him less viable night to night. You're still going to have the gigantic Curry days that pop up here and there, but it's a lower pace spot, I would guess, is part of it. But I think to me, having Draymond in makes him just a bad enough play where not even bad enough, but just slightly worse. And I think that's the main thing to take away from it, that I don't see him being a play at 5 figures on DraftKings. But Terry, do you have any feel at all for Steph Curry being more valuable than I do? I just don't know that the usage and the amount of possessions just don't seem to be there in the same way with Draymond in.
Yeah, if this game was in California and we were waiting on like 10 p.m., 9:30 news for whether or not Draymond was in, Steph is the kind of play where I'd be like really looking to smash him in as much as I could through the Swaptimizer and figure out ways to get to him if we got Draymond out news. If we get that right now, I think a lot of people might start doing that, and it'll definitely make him look better. Just in general, with Draymond on the floor, like you were talking about just then, and when you talked up Draymond earlier, he's done enough to kind of do old Draymond things where he's rebounding, he's taking some assists away, he's distributing the ball around. So he does take a little bit of the shine off of Steph. Steph can absolutely blow the lid off of the game with him on the court or without him on the court, but I think he does get a little bit of an uptick, and I think it would be visible in our projections in our boom bust tool if we get the Draymond news in advance. You'll see him climb a little bit, in which case I would like him better. Right now on both sites, he looks kind of like a mix and match kind of an option. I like the boom score percentage, the probability that he's going to break through that ceiling and give us a nice game, but he's not coming up a ton in the optimal lineup. And it's primarily because of the salary ask, over 10K on both sites at the point guard spot. There are just other ways to kind of spread that money around with some of the values and then get to your big scorers at other spots tonight. So it would be a different construction, but it might take you too far.
Is that the injury news gong? Has that ever been on the Live Before Lock show? I think that's been the late slate. For me. Is that the Steven Adams news? Is that okay?
No, I just didn't know what it was.
No, nothing like an unexpected. Terry was
gone too long.
Terry, right? I think I handled it pretty calmly, but it would have been funny if one of us shrieked like a mouse.
To just run out of the room.
Oh, there's a gong! Everybody save us! Some Godzilla versus Kong pre-promo, perhaps. But no, that's the injury news. Steven Adams officially out. Now I guess we can talk about Willy Hernangomez, a guy who is going to be on that top 5 projected own plays on DraftKings, though perhaps not the case for Fanduel. So make sure to pay attention here to this news coming up generally, but also hit the like button, smash that likes, and get us to 1,000. We'll give you guys the top 5 owned plays on DraftKings and Fanduel. But I'll spoil it right now. Willy Hernangomez is going to be pretty high up, perhaps even the chalk play of the day. You can find out in 10 minutes here. But Willy, to me, Terry, on DraftKings, I think a much different play than he is on FanDuel. FanDuel, it's going to be a play that I think is just one of many on FanDuel. But on DraftKings, to me, he seems like a guy who's going to be the make or break for the night to steal one of the bits that we do on the tip-off. Willie, I'm going to have 100% of on DraftKings. I just feel like the value's there in a big way. I think Jackson Hayes, there is a reason Willie passed him in the rotation. It's that Jackson Hayes, maybe too busy with his incredibly hot girlfriend, Sophia Jamora. So all credit to him on that front. But in terms of his normal game-to-game basis, Jackson Hayes not improving defensively, kind of not a great per minute guy, good at getting alley-oops. But besides that, I think I'd rather have Willie at this point. But how are you feeling about Willie Hernangomez? And tell me about DraftKings first, then give me your FanDuel thoughts, because I know somebody in the chat was complaining that it's not the FanDuel show, Terry. So don't start pandering to the FanDuel crowd too much.
I feel like I do, a fair job going back and forth across the sites. I try. It's all my action is on FanDuel though. The blue site's the better site. It's not. Don't go there. So Willie, very much in play. I think you're probably right to lock him on DK. He's just a absolute extreme value. I don't have him on my board because of a naming convention from the DK for some reason when it comes across from Alex's. So I don't actually have his DK percentages in front of me. But I mean, I know he's just a stone cold lock of a play over there, given the salary and given the expectation that we have for him. Did totally come in, seize the role, and he's always been a kid who's a quality scorer when he's on the court and getting some time, getting some looks, quality rebounder. We've seen him put up some big games, even going all the way back to when he was with the Knicks. So he's definitely got the capability. If he's on the court 28, 30 minutes, I like him to put up a decent score for that money. So absolutely, I would have a ton of them on DK. On FanDuel, exactly like you said, he's kind of one of several guys that could give you the night that we've got him projected to give you. Just looking at my numbers, I've got him needing a 34-point target, somewhere around there. It is $4,400 salary. Got him projected for 25.03. Alex has him for 24.6, so we're pretty similar. I've got him getting there 13% of the time. Alex has him getting there about 12% of the time. So he's in play. He's a mix and match option for sure, but he's nowhere near the mandatory get to him for sure kind of a play that he is on DK. You're only getting one center on FanDuel, and he costs a little bit more. So it's a little trickier on FanDuel. I would definitely try and get to some of them, though. I think there's plenty of opportunity to spread that money around to different spots if you wanted to.
It'll give you the Willie Hernangomez on FanDuel ownership under 15% for him. Actually, let me just double check because I think we just got to run here. I want to make sure that's accurate because we care that the most about accuracy here on this channel. Actually, down to 8% ownership on FanDuel. So if you are playing Willie, it's a contrarian play on FanDuel. If you are playing him on DraftKings, you are right with the field pretty heavy. And the way to get different is playing a lot of them or playing probably none of him. And honestly, 32% feels kind of light for DraftKings, but we'll see if we get any other updates here. And honestly, ownership, I've said this on some shows recently, and it's been dead on, including on one of the late slate shows recently where Tyler Johnson ended up being a late value play. People weren't getting there as much in our ownership. And tell you what, he didn't end up there owned nearly as much as he should have. And that could be the case for Willie today on DraftKings. While we're talking New Orleans, Terry, anybody else jump out to you as gaining a benefit here? Because I ran the rates alongside Hernangomez. And I think one thing which Greg Ehrenberg was talking about on the tip-off earlier and was saying about, Zion's rates without Hernangomez. And I think one thing to keep in mind is that Zion's still playing a lot of minutes alongside Ingram, and he gets the biggest boost in playing court time without Ingram. And my guess is that Zion's also playing a lot of those minutes without Ingram. He's playing them in the second unit. So he's not playing them with Adams. He's not playing them with Ingram. And we're seeing that boost because of that. But if you run Ingram and Williamson together, you're not seeing a big jump here. I think Willie's the one who really is going to take more off the table for these guys. But do you feel differently? Because I know people have been touting Zion lately. He's on a great run, hard to dispute that. But I think to me, I'd rather go the Willie way than go, some of these guys who just don't project that fantastically.
Yeah, this is still a team that just doesn't come up a ton for me, and it's particularly between Zion and Ingram. I get to some of the other guys when they're at appropriate value, like a Josh Hart. Sometimes Alonzo pops in there. I would definitely be getting to Willie Hernangomez tonight. But these two just don't pop for me very much. They're usually pretty appropriately priced. I agree. Zion's been having a great run. We talked about how consistently he was hitting like that 40-ish fantasy point night. He's extremely reliable. He does have some upside. He's shown the scoring upside. He's shown the rebounding upside. It's just a matter of getting it all together. But playing in that unit, it might not happen with Willie playing next to him. Willie might grab some of those additional rebounds that would have otherwise gone his way. The one thing I do think you could potentially gain on both sites, DraftKings person, is with Brandon Ingram, you get a little bit of leverage. he's coming up a little bit more optimal than the public is getting to him. Decent little boom score on him, and he doesn't cost too much. He's not priced down per se, but he might be a few bucks shy of where he should be priced for the potential upside here. So I don't hate that. I don't love the matchup in general against Phoenix, but if you wanted to pick another guy, it would probably be him. And then maybe I could mix and match some of the other two guys I mentioned, Hart and Lonzo, just because not enough people are getting to him, but neither one is a very big pop on either side.
We got the news here that I was going to say Steph Curry. Steph Curry's in. He's fine. But Ben Simmons is out now officially. And I don't know why no gong this time for Tyler. It's selective gonging is just not the way to live life, I would say. You want consistent gonging on this I'm just going to make it difficult for Tyler no matter what he does. But the gong is in. Ben Simmons ruled out. I think I want to come back to this in a second because I want to see if we get a minutes update pretty fast because I'm sure Awesemo's already on this one and how that affects everything. But let's talk about Josh Hart real fast for the Pelicans because I think this is one that people have been talking about a lot. I know Josh is debating with our guy Saz Crib and the Premium Slack at great length today about rebound rates and how, for the most part, Steven Adams tends to lead to a boost with Josh Hart's rebound rates. And you're sort of nickel and diming permanent play for the most part with all that. But Josh Hart's had some big days recently, Terry, and I guess it's getting to a point that's hard to ignore. How are you handling him? Because I haven't really had much of his big days recently. I've had, I think, 1% of him, 3% of him tops for the most part because he just doesn't project that well. Is there anything that you're seeing that's a reason to force your way to Josh Hart? Or do you think it's just one of those things that kind of an aberration in a short term that's going to level out?
Yeah, he's a player that I think is good. I wouldn't put him much beyond good. I think he's above replacement level for sure, but not a guy I get to a ton. Like I said before, when he's at a very good value or really standing out for whatever reason, somebody's out and he's stepping into starters minutes, getting a couple 5 additional minutes, that changes his outlook in my numbers. I'm getting him right around what Alex has for FanDuel. If I hop over to my spreadsheet here, I've got him 26.1. So I've actually got him a little bit higher projected than Alex does, getting him a little bit more optimal. The one thing that I like about him really would be the fact that people are a little bit under where I think he should be owned. So I could squeeze a little bit of him into my lineups that way for FanDuel. Taking a look at DK, it does look like he's more in play on Draftkings, just going off of Alex's numbers in terms of the optimal lineup rate. So he is popping up a little bit over there, and the price is a lot lower. So it makes sense to get to him a little bit more there. But I'm not wildly sold about the player in general. 0.82 fantasy points per minute this year, regardless of role. So he's a fine producer. He's a mix and match guy in general for me on most slates, though.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair. And I'm with you on DraftKings. I do think, seeing the value of him, he looks decent, but I think not a priority play. The price is up enough. I think you can maybe make a stronger case to go to Chetty just in terms of the raw projections, but Josh Hart should maybe be somebody to consider getting a little bit of, definitely not anyone to run away from, but I think it's just worth talking about briefly because I feel like it's been a topic of conversation. And sometimes guys get a rebound rate, and that's Josh Hart, as I think Adam mentioned on the deeper dive, one of the highest rebound rates on the team. So sometimes he's going to really have those days that pad those numbers on the year that make it look fantastic. And some days he's going to have, just a traditional guard rebounding day, but it's hard to sort of pinpoint that.
And that's something that I do always like to look for is guys who can, it's something I mentioned a decent amount, is guys who can get it done without relying on just scoring, specifically for guards, wings, guys who add rebounds, steals, the upside like that. I mentioned it with MCW with some of the intangible stuff that he does. So I think that does apply here. It's just not bearing out in the projections for me tonight. So, it's a sharp point for sure.
So Tobias Harris going to be a guy that takes a jump now with Ben Simmons out, it seems. And here's the thing that I actually I have to double check the rates I'm going to have in for Tobias because he rebounded really hard last game, but the usage really didn't take a jump. He played a lot of minutes, but only 24% usage if I'm rounding up. But he did have double-digit rebounds in that game. And I think now we have to talk Sixers because Seth Curry looks pretty strong in this situation here. Let me just double-check his projection, Alex's projection for him alongside mine. Alex has him at a 28.4. I've got him at 28.7 for Seth Curry. This is for tinkering with the rates a little bit here. Tobias, maybe a little bit less of a great projection on him, but still overvalued for DraftKings, it looks like. Joel Embiid looks solid. Danny Green, I think you can even make a case for here with a little bit of a bump for his way. But what Sixers look like a priority for you, Terry, given that no Ben Simmons here? There were some traps last game. Matisse Thybulle picked up the start there, didn't do much with it, but value-wise was, I think, okay enough to open up something. So what Sixers look like a priority to you in this spot against Chicago, who's so awful defensively, though a little bit less bad with Wendell Carter back in the mix?
Yeah, so the things that were kind of standing out to me as I was thinking this through, and I don't have any updates done here yet, so this is a little bit sans numbers, but I was kind of thinking, boy, I hope I don't have to go to a guy like Thibault, a guy like Korkmaz, somebody like that. Give me some Seth Curry. Give me a little bit of Danny Green, I guess, because he's 3,500 on FanDuel, and he'll just fit in because he's the dead minimum. Definitely give me some Tobias. And some Joel Embiid. I think we just stick with the guys that we know they're quality players, quality producers. I don't think there's enough call to really throw some of these darts. We've got enough value at other positions. These guys' salaries don't do enough for us. I would rather start Danny Green than either of those guys. I would much rather go up and find $500 to pay up to Seth Curry if I was doing that at the shooting guard spot. So I just want to rely on the four guys that I know are quality NBA players. I know they're going to be on the court for the bulk of the game. I know they're going to get their touches and get their minutes. So I want security if I'm going to that game, and I think that's the way to get there.
You know that Joel Embiid has a 27.5% assist rate in only 107 minutes, but that rate with Ben Simmons and Shake Milton off the floor, that seems impossible.
Yeah, that's surprising. That would definitely push him up a little bit. Maybe I'll give him a little tweak because of that. It's a good call by you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a small sample size stuff, which is, can sometimes be a trap where you end up over projecting a guy. But really the things you should be looking at here, looking at the ball handling, who gets a jump there. In terms of assist rates, it looks like Embiid getting a bump, Maxey gets a bump, Seth Curry goes to 19%, Tobias Harris goes to 17%. Though this is small sample size, so what I like to do for some of these things is to try to not give it the full amount, because that sort of gives you, I think, you'll find a closer, median projection, I guess, between the best case scenario and the worst case scenario. But I think a lot of these guys look very much in play, still a high total in this game. And I think this is going to change a lot of things around for the ownership, but it's money time anyway. So let me flip the hat here. And I think now we should wait for one more run of ownership, because I think we're going to see some Sixers pop up a bit, but smash that like button now, get us as close to 1,000 likes as you can. And I will give you guys the top 5 owned plays as soon as we get one more run in here, because I want to give you guys something that's more accurate. And I think things are going to be moving around quite a bit, but smash that like button. Top 5 owned plays for DraftKings and FanDuel coming up shortly. Got a super chat here. This is actually funny. This is a question we answered earlier, but Joseph's Adventures asking, getting a lot of MCW on FanDuel. Should I be worried? Terry, for a new crowd, should you be worried about getting MCW today?
Well, that's like the exact same question, almost word for word. Well done. No, I wouldn't be worried about him. I'm getting to him. I think he's definitely in play. We talked about some of the additional things that he does on the court to, maybe defer some of the worries about, losing a little bit off his assist rate and things like that, playing alongside the starting unit, playing alongside Fournier. So, yeah, I wouldn't be worried about it at all. I think he's at a pretty good price, was popping up a lot in my lineups, popping up a lot in Alex's numbers. So I'd be happy to get to him.
All right, we just got the run of ownership, so smash that like button as hard as you can if you're watching this one. And by the time I put it into my Excel spreadsheet, hopefully we'll have enough likes that I can deem it appropriate to give these out. And of course, you can always get the ownership yourself. You don't have to deal with my parlor tricks or anybody else's on this channel. If you go to awesemo.com/join, that's where you'll find all of Alex's data, the boom bust tool that Terry talks a lot about on here. We have columns about it on the site. It gives you an idea of, guys' chances of actually having a day that's going to get to their target score, or their chances of having a day that would be considered a bust play. It's a big part of people's processes, especially in the premium Slack recently, which another part of that premium membership. But some of our guys have been making, sheets that you pull from Fantasy Cruncher that sort then based upon the boom bust tool. There's a lot of evolutions on playing DFS out there that's going to be helpful to you guys. So make sure you're getting in at awesemo.com/join. And it looks like we got to 700 likes. So that seems to me like the top 4 owned plays here. And if the numbers trickle up, I give these beginning ones away here. I'll give away the 5th one. That's the one I'll leverage, hang over your heads desperately. Number 1 on DraftKings, according to our ownership projections at awesemo.com. Willie Hernangomez rounded up 42%. Cedi Osman, now number 2 at 26%. Fred VanVleet, number 3 at 26%. Number 4, Darius Garland at a rounded up 26%. On FanDuel, the top 4, Michael Carter-Williams. So you are not alone. Whoever just super chatted in, 38%. Cedi Osman at 37%. Seth Curry now up to number 3 at 33%. And number 4, Fred VanVleet at 31%. I guess we could have the Fred VanVleet conversation now, Terry, because we don't know the status of Kyle Lowry yet. He did seem to be trending towards not playing yesterday. And let's see, make sure that nothing else came through. JaMychal Green starting for the Nuggets, but no Kyle Lowry news yet. Are you assuming he's playing or not playing? Because I think this is an important one. And I feel like Fred VanVleet not going to kill you either way, but he's more of a, to me, like the ownership right now seems to be blowing the way of Kyle Lowry not playing. And I don't know that I believe that. To me, I kind of feel like he got an upgrade here, where yesterday they were thinking he wouldn't be in at all, then being questionable now instead of doubtful. Like, I do think that maybe we're going to see Kyle Lowry sneak in here. And I just, for people who don't want a late swap, like if you're going to Van Vliet and then Lowry's in, I feel like that's prime late swap material.
Yeah, it's a tricky spot on FanDuel because they're in different positions. So you're not getting any kind of a direct swapping capability. Much as I talk about not wanting to direct swap, specifically, these guys also have a $400 price difference between them. So that would probably be enough where even if they were the same position, you'd want to do the full swaptimizer and all of that. But just, as a hot swap, there's a little bit too much to make up in between them on FanDuel. So you'd be in a little bit of a mess if you did that. On DK, they're a little bit closer in position. Of course, you get Van Vliet with point guard eligibility, but they're actually further apart in salary. You've got an $1,100 difference there. So you'd be leaving a lot of salary on the table doing a direct swap with those guys on DK too. It would work, of course. It would be viable. I like Van Vliet a lot more with Lowry coming off the floor, but I think he projects well with him in. I don't think, like you said, it would kill you by any means. Still getting a very nice little projection in my numbers. Looks like Alex has a very solid boom score potential on him. Optimal lineup rate is right there. He's just getting owned a lot. He's one of our top owned plays on both sites, and he's outstripping his optimal lineup rate by a pretty big margin on both sites. So it depends. There are other pay up options that we like at other positions, but he was one that was coming up at the shooting guard spot, which on FanDuel was a little bit thinner fairly often. So he was one of the guys that the value was kind of leading toward the value from other positions. So maybe it's a case where you get to value at the shooting guard and pay up at one of those other spots you would have otherwise gotten value if you're looking to get away from Van Vliet.
We officially got the news here. YouTube chat, very on top of it, but so is our news god as well. Draymond Green officially playing. So there we go. That's if you were worried about him like I was, I'm still going to have to do another optimization and another crunch, figure out everything here. But Draymond playing is a big news item here, and I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of them. Let's keep going through here. And any other injury items, by the way, Terry, that I feel like you might need to look out for? And JaMychal Green starting for Denver. I think I mentioned that already. But anything that you're planning for here? Because I think the Clippers game could be important. We're seeing Paul George and Kawhi still questionable. And I think like right now that game looks unplayable. And I guess hopefully we'll know more by the time we're doing the late slate show. But I think that game is one where maybe you save some room for Utah as well if Mike Conley doesn't make it in. Are there any injuries that we don't have yet that you're making contingencies for or trying to plan around?
I think that would have been the spot, but I don't really have any specific contingencies in mind. It's something where I would hope that I have enough time to get into Swaptimizer and see where I can land if we get news on Conley, if we get news of either Paul George or Kawhi Leonard being in, the other one being out, or both being in, et cetera, et cetera. So I definitely think value could emerge if they're both out. I definitely think one or the other would be a pretty good play if they're both in, if one is in. If they're both in, it doesn't make me as excited about either one or the team in general. And then on the Utah side of things, I could get to a little bit of Donovan Mitchell anyway, regardless. So I'll try and have some of him, but I think I would want more of him if Conley isn't going to go. And then I think that would give a little kick to guys like Jordan Clarkson, a little kick to Joe Ingles and some of these other guys. But really, I think it would primarily make me want to get onto more shares of Donovan Mitchell because I think at that point he would be under-owned because I don't think the entire slate would be making that move.
Yeah, and I think with Donovan Mitchell too, he's really the one guy that, the value hasn't been entirely priced out of him where, he's still going to have the upside. He's still going to get some more usage, going to get some more assist upside. But he's mostly where he is, where he's priced without or with Conley normally. So without Conley, he gets better. I think Joe Ingles, the value's kind of been priced out of him, even though he gets a pretty big bump in assist rate for him and even a little bit of usage. And for the Clippers, I think it's one where these guys, to me, like Lou Williams looks entirely unplayable. Alex has him for a 17-point projection right now. And if we do get one of Paul George out, then you see Lou's usage come up enough, the minutes come up enough where maybe he gets there. And if, Paul George and Kawhi are out, then Lou, I think, is actually a very appealing play potentially, even against Utah, which I didn't look fantastic for him last time out. But overall, it's right now that game looks entirely unplayable if we're to assume those guys are in, and kind of the same for Utah if we're to assume Conley's in.
And Lewis just had a weird year just in terms of how he's gotten it done or not gotten it done really, and the lack of usage, the lack of just everything. Just have not gotten to him a lot this year. I was a little bit at the beginning when I was still mostly using last year's metrics, and it was pushing him up a little. but he has just really crashed and burned through a lot of this year. So I don't know how much I would even go to him, even if those guys are out. If the process pushes him up and he looks really, really unavoidable, and particularly if nobody else is going there. But I think that's also a natural for people to, all right, those two are out, Lou will. So it makes it kind of a natural next decision point for a lot of people. So I might look to start spreading that around if possible, but it's tricky to figure out where too.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Looking around for some questions, nothing good in the premium Slack right now. So if you have any questions, drop them in there and we'll take a few. But one question, which I didn't ask you, Terry, which I do think is worth circling back on here. We talked about the top owned plays on FanDuel, Seth Curry being one of them on FanDuel. We have him projected for 33%. And as always, get them all for yourself at awesemo.com/join. In addition to the projections themselves, the boom bust tool, and our boy Alex Baker, Awesemo, working as hard as possible, dropping things off in the chat immediately when he gets them up there. So go support that man who clearly needs some help here with his crippling Top Shot addiction. You need to go sign up at awesemo.com/join. Terry, how are you feeling about a 33% owned Seth Curry? Because that is a play that immediately is going to be one of the chalkier ones on FanDuel. Draftkings going to be also pretty highly owned, but it's not as much of a spot where you could leverage on, or that you might just want to take straight away with his price being 4K on FanDuel. How are you handling him on there? Or how do you anticipate as you're starting to do your crunches and build things out?
Yeah, so with the change in minutes, looks like he got up to around a 27-ish point projection for me, which doesn't change very much in terms of where his target score needs to be. It just gets him closer to that in the median projection. So that makes me like him even more, pushes up his on-target rate for me. It's not the greatest ownership in the world, but I think where I've got him in terms of on-target, I think I can still push past that amount of ownership and roster him above the field. 4,000 is enough value there that I think I need to get to Seth Curry in a pretty broad way here. So he's going to be a big part of what I do, I think, today.
Yeah,
we'll see how it comes up in process, but that's eyeballing it. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, it's a nice price on Seth. And even if, you're a little leery of him having quite as big of a day as he had last time, he's still going to look good. I think last time was pretty close to a ceiling game for him. This time, I think if we see even a reasonable outcome, whether it be on FanDuel or DraftKings, I think he still looks pretty solid here. I'm actually curious.
Close enough to the median projection that we have would be almost enough. So we don't need to ask very much more of him than that. So an extra 3, a rebound or 2, and we're home.
Here's a question, which the YouTube chat, I missed who it was because the YouTube chat's moving pretty fast. We appreciate all you guys participating, and just want to make sure I try to give credit to people if I can to their questions. But somebody asked, are we overlooking Joel Embiid in this conversation at all, given the fact that, he did crush last game? The usage rates for him certainly take the biggest jump overall. And there are so many centers here where I could see there's a world where Joel Embiid does end up feeling a little bit overlooked. But how do you feel about Joel Embiid's prospects today in this spot? And do you feel like there's a sneakiness to him, given the fact that he's not going to be definitely not a chalk play on any of the sites?
Yeah, only around 22% owned, it looked like, on FanDuel before that window just disappeared from in front of my eyes while I was trying to read it. There it is. So yeah, Alex and I have him projected right around the same. And that's got him for me at like half of where wanting to be around like half of what the field's ownership is. So I would be underweight on him. But I definitely think there's upside for a ceiling game there. He's going to be the focal point of the offense. It's going to be him and Tobias for the most part out there. So he's going to have to do a lot. We've seen him obviously smash the ceilings before. It's just at salary and compared to some of the other guys at the position on FanDuel, I'm just not getting to him quite as much. I like the other spots a little bit better, and I think we can squeeze out some leverage on some of the other spots. So he'll be in some of my lineups. Probably not as many as I'll hope once I check the score for the first time and he's got 25 in the first quarter or whatever. But I don't know that I'll be there if he does go through, smash through that ceiling score. So if you want to get him into your lineup and you can afford it, I don't have any problem with it whatsoever, but I won't be there.
I'm also going to manually cut Danny Green. I don't mind taking the Seth Curry chalk, but Danny Green's popping up way too much for me to feel comfortable. And I'd rather have pretty much any Sixer besides Danny Green. I think that's something maybe not to be mindful of, but if you're like me and you don't love Danny Green, you've been burned by him too many times, that's one that I'm going to make that adjustment straight away.
So I'm going to play the opposite game, and I'm going to hope more people are making that adjustment and getting away from him. I want Danny Green at the minimum at my small forward spot if I can. I don't love it. It's not comfy. But I kind of like to go to those, uncomfy plays that other people don't like.
The thing is, because the way that I do things, like I put him down to 5% exposure on Cruncher, and he's going to be in some of my top projected lineups that get sorted out. So I just want to make sure that I'm not getting 100% Danny Green, because that's not a place I want to be. And that's not a mental state any of you want me to be for the next 2.5 hours I'm doing shows on here.
I don't think anybody wants you to be there. I don't think anybody wants to be there themselves. Yeah, that would be a bit much.
All right, let's go back to the premium Slack, checking to see if there's anything good going on here. And also, and people were curious about Draymond not being officially confirmed. He's on the starting lineups that the PR teams put out, so that's where that came from, in case anybody was concerned about maybe that one not being a valid one, but that is a valid one. Let's see. Let's keep going through some of these games that we haven't touched on, because I'm wondering, actually, Terry, if you have any that you haven't, that we haven't hit on yet that seem appealing to you, because I'm curious if there are any that we haven't hit. Like, we haven't talked about Minnesota side. I know people maybe want to talk Anthony Edwards after he's been all over the place lately. Towns in play there. Any games really or teams that we haven't hit on that are meaningful to you right now?
I'd be better equipped to answer that after I actually run this crunch, but let me see who somebody I thought we were
here, I'll give you one. How about Detroit? Because I know you weren't bullish on the Detroit parlay, but Jeremy Grant, to me, just undervalued by the marketplace pretty much always. And it's been a drum that we beat a lot with Super Draft. Of course, we are going the extra half hour today to talk Super Draft in addition to any breaking news. So stay tuned with us. The show is, just go consider the show now today. It's a 90-minute show. Hang on, because there's going to be lots of valuable things that news-wise that come out that drive us insane, but ultimately give you a little bit of a sliver more of plus EV here on the slate. But Jeremy Grant, I think, still a priority play for me. And I have, some concerns. I'm not a DVP guy, but I worry. Kyle Anderson has shown the ability to make, days tough on people. But when I look at the numbers for Jeremy Grant, 28% usage rate in court time without Blake Griffin and without Derrick Rose in the lineup, both guys obviously out of town. And then last game against Chicago, Jeremy Grant had 38% usage in 38 minutes, put up 25 shot attempts, ended up scoring 43 real life points. Peripherally, he fell off a cliff there, only 2 boards, no assists, had just 1 block. But still, for me, Jeremy Grant, I think there's a massive ceiling here. It's going to require some things to align for him to have that outlier day. But Memphis has given up good production to guys recently, like that New Orleans game a couple week ago, I think it was, really, to me, was a sign of what they're sort of capable of giving up at a high level. Jeremy Grant, Delon Wright, I think guys who are undervalued. Mason Plumlee, the value's kind of been priced out of him for the most part, but I think for a tournament play, I don't absolutely hate it. But do you have any feel at all for Detroit or any interest in Detroit, given that I think they're not priced where they should be, given that Blake Griffin and Derrick Rose just gobbled up so many possessions and were so inefficient with so many of them?
Yeah, for sure. And I get to watch that now with Derrick Rose back here in New York. That'll be fun. I think Jeremy Grant would definitely be the play there. I like Delon Wright as well. I would probably be getting to a good amount of him if I can get this crunch running. But Grant was the one who stood out for me, and it's all about the amount of shots and the amount of usage. If he's going to just be touching the ball that much, if he's going to be taking that many shots, I'm going to put him in my lineup, and I will take what I get from him, because I think the ball's going to fall more often than not, and we're going to get to some of those ceiling games. And we don't need him to hit every night for us. We only need him to hit once in a while, and he stands out. I think he's a very good play again. He's not over-owned by any means. He's drawing a little bit negative leverage, but this is one that people ask a decent amount about the boom bust tool. When we see a guy with negative leverage, does that mean you can't play him? No, not by any means. So he's got a pretty strong score for his optimal lineup appearance rate on both sites. On DraftKings, he's in positive leverage, so he's looking even better over there. 7,500, you can play him at both the small forward and the power forward. But the negative leverage on FanDuel doesn't chase me away, because he's got a decent price at the power forward spot. There's not a lot of guys at the position that are ranking above him in terms of appearances in the optimal lineup. So it makes him look more like a building block piece to me than it does a piece that we can avoid and kind of replace with somebody else in that lineup. So I can definitely get to a good amount of Jeremy Grant, and I would like it even better if I was on DK.
One other, I guess, potential building block here, and actually, I'm very curious where my Michael Carter Williams ownership is going now that we have some more value out there that could be in the same range for me. Steph Curry, I've projected pretty closely, and I think it's going to change things around for me. But one spot we haven't talked about much that's going to be highly owned and actually maybe moving around a little bit is Darius Garland, and really the Cleveland team in general on their side of the equation. Going against Denver has been a spot that you've seen some production, be solid for teams. And sometimes they also just clamp down and everything looks a lot better for Denver defensively. Kind of harkens back to the old Nuggets days where they actually did defend pretty well and do some things. But are you buying in on Darius Garland at all? I think it may be a different play on DraftKings and FanDuel. I'm still actually getting a lot lot of them, and I'm kind of shocked by how much I'm getting of him. The assist rate does take a good jump with no Andre Drummond. He does shoot a little bit more. He actually put up 20 shots last game. Didn't assist quite as well, but Darius Garland, I feel like a guy that kind of feels like a sleeping giant, but also just a guy that wouldn't shock me if I'm left holding the bag again. I'll be heavy there, Terry. How do you feel about Garland or really any of the other Cavaliers?
I guess a little bit less bullish than that, but he would definitely work his way through process into some of my lineups. I would not want him, over the field, I don't even think, but around the fields, which is probably going to be in the 25-ish% range on FanDuel, I wouldn't have much of a problem with that. I think the usage is there. I think the time is there. Coming back into that lineup and getting some of the big touches from, a guy like Andre Drummond, who just soaks up some of that, not some, a big portion of that, I think just distributes it to the rest of this team a little bit better. So a rising tide for some of these guys, not all of these guys, but he definitely falls into that bucket. So I can get to him. I just think 5,400 probably around right for right now for him on FanDuel. If we see him really start to hit his stride, I could see that come up a little bit, and then he'd probably be priced out of play. So this price has him like right in where I would want him. I'd love to see if he was a 4,800, even like 5,200, 5,000, he'd probably be popping a lot more for me. But yeah, I like the player and I like the spot. So I think he could definitely get away with playing him, no doubt.
Yeah, no, I think overall, Darius Garland is a player that I'm not able to get away from. Also, I did not get away from Michael Carter-Williams. I'm now just playing him alongside Seth Curry and Darius Garland. So I've got real hodgepodge group that I wouldn't have anticipated being core building blocks today, but hopefully they are, because oh god,
the old scrubs and scrubs build. I love it.
Yeah. that was so hurtful. That cut deep. But tune into the late slate sweat and swap show coming up here, the L3S. It'll be going on in about an hour and 10 minutes because the late slate tonight is earlier than usual. It was me and your old pal Emac, and we'll find out pretty fast how I'm feeling about Darius Garland and Michael Carter-Williams when I'm sure all the value opens up and those guys play like absolute ass. But that's part of the fun of that show. We talk about the late slate. We have some fun on there, and I'll certainly be hitting the old wine at that point. Nice. Here's a question in the YouTube chat, and this is a guy we haven't talked about at all, but is another play that I think I'm getting a lot of because of the value out there. Giannis, coming off of a disappointing game yesterday, was heavy on him there. Chris Middleton too, I think, sort of a hot topic of debate recently. Everybody's tired of playing him. He hasn't had the outlier days that befit the rates for him, where he does get a jump in usage, does get a jump in assists and court time without Drew Holiday, but he just hasn't been hitting his shots, hasn't been kind of putting it forward as much as he seemingly did throughout the earlier parts of the year in that court time. But Giannis, to me, I think a play that hard to get away from because of this value. I think in terms of the studs, he'd be my favorite. It kind of sucks because I wish I got more Joel Embiid, but I'm going to be heavy Giannis today at the price point, adjusting for all the data out there. How are you with Giannis and Middleton as well, who, again, there's value, might be value in playing rather, just because people don't want to play him anymore?
Yeah, I love that. Keep pushing that narrative that Chris Middleton is no good and no good for fantasy basketball or anything like that. I think he's a very proven guy. We've seen him do it for a couple years now. I am not at all worried about Chris Middleton paying off his value. Might not happen again tonight, but he is a good fantasy player. I will happily roster him when he looks good and when people aren't getting to him, and he looks good tonight. The ownership is relatively there. He's about even with the field on FanDuel. A little bit of leverage on him on DK. You're getting very minimal leverage score, probably draw even once all said and done. You can flex him around small forward and shooting guard on DraftKings, so I do like that. I like the price on him. 7,300 is too cheap for Chris Middleton on FanDuel. I'm sorry. That is just an incorrect price. I know he hasn't been great, but 1.11 fantasy points per minute, I think he can hit that mark without too much difficulty. And I'm getting to just a ton of Giannis. Like you said, there's so much value, and it might come in the form of ugly lineups where you're playing three of those guys like you just read off before, but that's what gets you there. And if those lineups math out the right way, then by all means, we got to play them, and we've got to play as much of them as possible. And that's the kind of lineup we're looking for to get us to those big end plays like Giannis. So absolutely, I will take as much of them as I can get.
Speaking of Fantasy Wiz in the premium Slack, asking Michael Carter-Williams and Giannis or Murray and Grant for a FanDuel GPP. I think for me, based on the projections that I have and the amount of ownership I have on DK, it'd be Carter-Williams and Giannis. But Terry, for FanDuel, how do you feel about that with MCW and Giannis or Murray and Grant?
It would be MCW and Giannis for me for sure, and then figure out how to get different another spot. Don't go to like a 0.1 owned guy. Just grab like a 10% owned guy, a 12% and 8%, somebody in that range. Plug them into one of your other positions and start to roll. But I think that's a very good first two clicks in your lineup.
Let's see. Next question here from Iron Maiden 2 asking Jokic and Hart or Siakam and Middleton for a DK GPP. He's already playing Van Vliet. Man, that's interesting. Wait, how do you feel about this, Terry, for DK? Because I'm actually curious on how you feel, because I feel like to me this is actually one of the rare ones where I really do like both sides.
It was Jokic and Hart.
Yeah, or Siakam and Middleton.
Boy, I really like the idea of getting to both Siakam and Middleton.
Mm.
Maybe that side, but look to get away from Fred Van Vliet then. I don't know that I would want to play both of them side by side without the Lowry news, which we don't have still, right?
Yeah, I think I'd go Siakam and Middleton on that one. I do like Jokic and Hart, but Hart's a guy that I think is kind of bubbling down for me now. I think he's going to be a little bit higher owned than what he should be compared to some of the other guys like Seth Curry, who's going to be in the most recent run of ownership, projected not too highly though. Actually, let's see if that changes again.
And it makes sense that Seth Curry would swap into that spot a decent amount of the time. So I could see
so
that.
actually I'm gonna need to resort my stuff again, because Seth is now up to 26% on DK, and I think that that changes a lot of stuff, or could change a lot of stuff for me. But let me just put that in. Let's see. Next question, the premium Slack. Kemba versus Delon Wright for a FanDuel GPP. Also, actually kind of big news. Dylan Brooks out for Memphis, which not one I would have expected, but could be important because he's a pretty high usage guy.
Yeah, heavy usage guy, and it could open up some opportunity for those also rans like the tripping artist Grayson Allen, and who else is in that lineup? The rest of those guys. What, Contour? Right?
Yeah, I mean, I would think Kyle Anderson maybe keeps it going a little bit more, given that
Anderson for sure.
Yeah, I find his games recently to be kind of unsustainable, and this is somebody I was playing a lot of Kyle Anderson earlier in the year. Is Melton still out? Do we know that news yet?
I don't have him projected as in. I think he is still out. Yeah.
I
had Anderson. Yeah, I was using Alex's minutes today.
Oh no, he's available to play. Came out 1 minute ago, so now he's in.
Melton. Okay. Melton. Right?
Okay.
Melton.
This actually is going to be another recrunch, it seems, because this is one of those news items that doesn't seem that big, but especially I think for my side, I don't force players in just because I'm playing Detroit guys, but I think could make Memphis pop in a little bit more, which I would like, given the fact that I'm going to be pretty heavy on Jeremy Grant.
Moving Kyle Anderson from the 27 and change minutes that I had to like a 32 minute would force him up pretty significantly, I think.
And we just got a projections update 1 minute ago, so hopefully this one will be with the Dylan Brooks news. And it is. All right, so let me get this in. It always happens, Harry. There's no way to avoid it. It's like Thanos in the Avengers movies.
It's inevitable.
It's simply inevitable. All right. Do you have how are your lineups looking? Did you get your stuff in?
I'm just taking it out of Fantasy Cruncher now and pasting it into Excel, which is hopefully the easy part. I didn't get a chance to combine them, so I might end up accidentally duping my own lineups, but that'll be fun. I'll just have to win twice.
Yeah, I would like to run one more sim for myself to have my stuff aligned correctly for the exposures, but
2 minutes.
That may not be able to be viable here in the stretch run. Let me just look at Memphis real fast and see what took a jump. John Morant looks a little better to me. Honestly, these guys, Kyle Anderson didn't take the jump too much. This might not be one for Memphis. I need to recrunch. I might just need to resort because of the Seth Curry ownership. I'm like, it feels like there should be more for Memphis than I'm seeing right now, based on like, I would have thought one of these guys would gain a little bit more, but I don't see any of them being that much more appealing.
Yeah, and with Ja back, it kind of makes sense that some of that would just default to him maybe in the numbers, and it just wouldn't really come up enough to push somebody like a Kyle Anderson. I thought Anderson would get there on the minutes only. I haven't adjusted it in mine. I just am not going to have the time to wrestle with it. He was coming up enough that I think I'll have some of them. But I expect that would give him, let's call it 5 and change fantasy points if I give him a couple extra minutes. So that would be a pretty significant difference. So I'm surprised he's not popping at least a little bit more. And that might just be, it might just be a product of just the numbers catching up right now.
Yeah, I think it's weird for guys like Kyle Anderson, where when he gets a certain price, if you're not giving a meaningful bump in usage, maybe they just don't come. And Alex has him for a 33-point projection on Draftkings. So if that's something that you guys are wanting to use today, that you can take that one for free. And let me just get this shit in. We got about 1 minute left to lock, and then we have the half hour left. Of course, talking Super Draft and all the other important news items that'll come, which, as we all know from playing NBA DFS recently, there will be news, and it will be something something that makes Terry and I very sad. So that's another wrinkle here for you guys to enjoy during the show, especially if you enjoy trolling me. You can watch me literally die on streams when things break. All right. I got boom.
30-ish seconds.
Whew. All right. I'm in. I wanted to get one more crunch in. I'm not doing it though. So that's fine. All right. Let's see. We got looking for questions. Going back to the premium Slack for questions.
See what's actually in here now.
Kemba and Middleton or McLaughlin and Siakam. And this person's playing FVV for FanDuel cash.
Kemba and Middleton for me for sure.
Yeah, that feels.
Kemba was underpriced. Yeah, Kemba was underpriced on FanDuel. He's a better cash option.
All right. And now we are locked for DraftKings and FanDuel. We missed one from DK Priest. My apologies. Kemba versus Delon Wright. I have a lot more right on DraftKings today, but it's a FanDuel question, Terry. So this may not matter now too much. I guess you could swap it. So Kemba versus Delon Wright.
Since we missed it, we got waylaid by that Dylan Brooks news, I think, when we were about to dive into that one. So let me get back to the point guards here real quick. Bear with me. Oh, we've got time. We're going into the next show.
Yeah, we got. Yeah, don't worry, Terry. We got a half hour of Super Draft here and any breaking news, and then we have another hour coming up here. I got a half hour between shows, and I'll be right back with you with your old pal Emac doing the late slate swap and sweat, or the L3S as all the cool kids are calling it on the streets. So come tune back in after this half hour ends, and then I'll be back with wine and maybe some sadness. So that's I guess a lot more too.
So those guys are pretty side by side for me in my numbers, the way I break them down. I do have, looks like Delon Wright projected at 35.14 on FanDuel and Kemba Walker projected at 34.83. So very, very close. With the salary difference, you're talking about Kemba needing to get to a target score that's about 2.1 lower. So we're really only talking about the difference of an assist and change, an extra field goal, something like that would draw the difference between these guys. So then it would come down to what the ownership looks like. It looked like Kemba was getting a little bit more over-owned, and given the closeness of the other numbers, I would be able to squeeze out enough leverage that I think it would vault right above him despite the price increase. So I think it would be Delon Wright by a nose, but it's very close on FanDuel.
Hold on. Let me just make sure. Kyle Lowry, we still don't officially have that news, right?
Not that I've seen.
Okay, did Alex take him out
I
of
haven't
his
heard a gong.
projections? Because
he was in the last update I had.
No, he's not in the most recent one. I didn't see it come through. If News God knows anything, feel free to tag me because I didn't see this come through. But Alex did take him out of the most recent run, and because I was wondering why Fred VanVleet was his number 2 super draft play, and it's because Lowry was out now in his projections.
That would be it. Still not seeing it. He must have just taken it out on confidence. Yeah. I think that Nick Nurse quote was pretty telling about the one from yesterday, just about the stat. He didn't seem optimistic at all that he was going to go. So unless whoever it was that made the joke that Lowry might be able to argue his way into the lineup, could happen. But I think the coaching staff, the training staff would like him to sit tonight.
Yeah, our boy El Negro Loco, the news god, saying no Lowry news yet. So I didn't miss anything. I'm just trying to make sure we stay on top of it, especially given some of the faux pas that our pals Josh and Greg had with Toronto yesterday. This time, we're nailing any Raptors news and rotational changes that may come. That I gotta make it up after. That was so funny. Terry, I don't know if you saw the show yesterday, but they thought that Norman Powell was sitting for DeAndre Bembry, I think it was, and then they just went on for like 15 minutes about it, not reading the chat. It was one of my favorite moments because you can see how it would happen as a host.
Oh, totally. I rarely, and guys, apologies, actually. I never get to say this, but if I don't answer your questions, if I don't see you, I see later on, everybody says thanks and all those nice things. Thank you very much for watching and all the nice thank yous throughout the course of the season, because I never actually am looking at the YouTube chat while we're doing these things. So we really appreciate it. But unless I'm answering specific questions, I miss all those witty comments and stuff.
It's funny. We miss the nice things, and then you see the people who just posted crap over and over again.
Totally.
It's super draft time, so positive vibes only, as always. We try to always do here. I think at the end of the day, it's a community here on this Awesemo channel, and really, anything you're doing DFS wise, we're all trying to win money together. I don't view it as a competitive thing. I think at the end of the day, I hope you guys listen to the things and things help, and if they don't, then cool, be mad about it. But then follow your heart. You got to learn your own things and figure out your own process and try to get better. And speaking of The process on Super Draft today, which you can get in, use the promo code Awesemo21 because they will deposit match your $50 on there, give you $50 right back to you at superdraft.io or downloading Super Draft in the App Store. And they have a lot of stuff going on today. Big tournaments up top. And actually, let me see how close they are to filling because they've had a lot of overlay and rake recently. And we try to preach to you guys that as a DFS player, like obviously paying attention to news is important. Having great projections, having some of the Awesemo data or just, door data you trust, whatever it may be is important. But the most important thing is playing on sites that are giving you free money over and over again. And that's what Super Draft has been doing thanks to their partnership with Caesars Rewards. They're pumping a lot of money in these tournaments. And you'll see them sometimes get only 66% filled. Sometimes, not getting the rake, not getting the overlay in there, or having to pay out of pocket rather. So that's something on Super Draft you can get in there. So use that promo code Awesemo21. Check out the 50K jump shot with 10K to first today. The 4-point play also has 20K guaranteed with 3K to first, and that's a $4 entry. The jump shot's a $15 entry. These are reasonable entries in there, and it's going to be easier to win money because you're just competing against less people. So play on Super Draft now. And Terry, the top projected play on Super Draft, according to Awesemo, which I agree with, is Joel Embiid. He has a 1.15x multiplier. And I think really on Super Draft, I was having an issue getting to Embiid because my crunches like Giannis so much. And I'm now, I think, going to be heavy Giannis, and I couldn't find a way to get there while doing the show. But I think if you're not getting, if you're like me, you're getting Giannis, you're not getting enough Embiid on DraftKings or Fanduel today, I think playing on Super Draft might be the move. Just putting him in there. He's got forward eligibility too, so you're not even eating up a center spot if you wanted to go a different direction there. Like Embiid to me, would be a 100% lock play on Super Draft tonight.
Yeah, sounds great. I mean, I had completely forgotten about the forward eligibility. That just made my eyes pop when you said that. That's absolutely, he should be a lock play. With that multiplier, definitely not priced accurately for Simmons being out and for the situation that they're going to be in. So yeah, absolutely smash play on Super Draft tonight. And I like that idea of just, hey, I got to these other guys on the pay sites because of the ways the salaries broke down, the positioning, all of that. Particularly if you're a FanDuel player, a lot of times we get this scenario. Wow, these two centers look great, but I'd like to play these other three who also look really good. And Joel Embiid's a star, and I really want to play him, and it's fun and all that. This is the site you can do it. You can play whoever you want on this site. So especially when he looks that good, makes a heck of a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, so Embiid going to be the number one play with a bullet. And then here's the play that, if you're assuming that Lowry doesn't make it in, it does make a lot of sense. If you are like me and had the most recent run of minutes with Lowry not in, or with Lowry in, you're not going to see this guy popping up as much. And I think it's interesting because that's a huge difference where Fred VanVleet is number 2 for Awesemo on Super Draft. But because I didn't make the change on my end, I have him as number 22. And I think this is a spot where, if you feel confident that Lowry's not going to be in, and he was, doubtful the last time we heard, though, I think these things with the NBA, as we've all learned, be prepared for anything. Don't be surprised by anything. I'll ask you, Terry, would you feel comfortable just treating VanVleet like a lock at this point on Super Draft with the 1.3 multiplier? Because it's not going to be a bad number either way. It's just, is it going to be a fantastic number one way or another? And I think, it could be smart just to play him and play it safe and just get him in now.
Yeah, I think it probably makes sense. I mean, we talked about it earlier when we were talking about this specific spot, and he looked good anyway. Alex was projecting Lowry in for most of the day, and VanVleet still looked pretty good. Part of it was on FanDuel where it was a difference in positioning between those two specifically, but given the minutes, the role, and all of that, and just how he's been playing, I don't see any need to really jump off of Fred VanVleet if we got the news that Lowry was in. So I think it makes sense. You can put him in and be safe. If you got the news that Lowry was going to play and you had time and the inclination to get him out of there and swap to somebody else, that could also make some sense. But I think you're going to be safe and you're getting the upside of, I think Lowry's going to sit. And in that case, Fred VanVleet looks pretty damn good.
Yeah, no, I think VanVleet right now is a good enough play that I would just put him in on Super Draft and just build around that. And for our boy Tyler, let's put Embiid in at a forward spot and then put in VanVleet at a guard spot, because I think he's going to be fine either way. And, playing Minnesota certainly doesn't hurt, where he can have an outlier day even if Lowry were in. But then if Lowry isn't in, you're going to see VanVleet be probably very necessary for the same reasons that Joel Embiid is necessary. And over under brings up a fair point in the YouTube chat real fast, saying that I do normally try to couch myself and say that guys aren't a lock. And I think that's true. But, with the sorting process that I have, I think sometimes a guy ends up being 100%. And I know, looking at the projections and the multiplier in Embiid, that I would, if I ran 500 crunches, or ran a crunch rather with 500 lineups for Super Draft, Embiid would be in all of them, because it's just the projection is a monster one for him. And anytime I'm right there with Awesemo for the number one play, I'll happily take it. There's another one too, Terry, that I think and I think you can nickel and dime this one a little bit, but to me, I feel actually even more confident, I guess, about this play. Pascal Siakam. If Lowry is out, I think another guy who gets a pretty big jump. He's Awesemo's number 3 play. If Lowry's in, he's still pretty solid here. 1.3x multiplier for him too. And these guys really, I think, like you were talking about with Embiid, just not priced for Lowry being in, and honestly, not priced for Lowry being in, and probably almost definitely not priced for Lowry being out. But 1.3x multipliers on both guys, Terry, against Minnesota. Would you move away from Siakam, or are you comfortable putting him in too?
Yeah, I think you can get there when he looks that good. And we're talking about, again, it's guys who are mispriced for the situation that I think is going to happen. I think Lowry's going to sit. So I think you're getting, well, actually, I'm sorry, that doesn't make any sense what I was just starting to say. I told you as I was tired at the beginning of the show. The real brain ain't working here. So they're priced appropriately for the situation because it's priced probably expecting that Lowry would be in, but they still look very good on the board, and we're getting them in a different situation where they're going to be getting the ball a little bit more. So I think there's a very good reason to play both of those guys in that lineup. It makes a lot of sense. Solid multiplier. Go for it.
All right, so Siakam will put in it forward as well. And I think here's a spot that is interesting to me because this is one that normally it's not the case where, you know, the thing with Super Draft is you can play the studs. You can play all the studs if you wanted at every position. You could play Embiid, you could play Giannis, you could play all these guys night in after night out. But for the most part, the superstars are going to be marked down enough that, you know, the middle tier players on your Draftkings and Fanduel are going to pop up more. And they end up being, you know, it's a weird push-pull with Super Draft where let's talk about it with Josh on the Super Draft sponsored show the other day. And the idea of, you know, like, who was it? It was Isaiah Stewart. Isaiah Stewart, people were like treating like he was a lock on Super Draft because he had a 1.95x multiplier. And that, you know, that's going to give you a decent projection, but it's not the same play because you have a bunch of guys in that mid-tier 1.5x, 1.3x, 1.6x. And then you have the stars who sometimes end up 1.1x. That it's, you know, Isaiah Stewart isn't the same play on there. But Giannis tonight in this spot against Oklahoma City with a 1x multiplier is one of those rare guys who projects super well. And also, you know, even with the 1x is going to be amongst the best guys regardless. How would you handle him, Terry? Because he's going to be very important to me as we've talked about on Draftkings. I know you said the same thing for you on FanDuel, but are you willing to go heavy on him on Super Draft where he is only getting the 1x?
Yeah, I think just based on the way that he projects, he's right there after those other guys are multiplied. He's right there, like you said, the 4th guy on the board on his just plain old medium projection. So he's just in a great spot. He projected well for me all day, projected well for Alex all day. One of the top guys on the board across the industry for you know, every site that we cover. So I would have no qualms about rostering Giannis in most situations, really. But it is important, like you're saying, to compare those points, those projections after they're multiplied. So everybody understands that within that median projection, we've got some potential for upside, some potential for downside. But when you've got the specific multiplier, just do the simple math. And a lot of times you'll see a guy like Isaiah Stewart. Yeah, he's a great value because he's, you know, starting and only costs $3,900 on some of these other sites. So when he's projected still for only 22 fantasy points with upside to 30, that's great. But if he's got that projection with a 1.8 or even a 2 multiplier, if he's a 23 fantasy point output at a 2 multiplier, he's not going to come anywhere near Giannis's median projection. Even if Giannis has a bad game, he's probably not going to exceed what Giannis does in a bad game. So you have to pay attention to what that multiplier is, but you also have to pay attention to what it's multiplying, because sometimes it's just not going to be enough raw points to get you there. Sometimes we just do have to worry about just the raw point projection. And in this case, and on this site, that's very important. So I think getting to Giannis is a no-brainer.
Yep. So let's put him in the lineup here. I'm with you. I have him as my number 2 play for Super Draft, even with the 1x. Alex has him as number 4. So I feel like that's a meeting of the minds here. One great mind, and then mine just there existing, doing what it does. Being
my tired mush having him second on FanDuel and my distributions contributes to the case. And
yeah, look, that's a good tiebreaker there. Now we have Terry here to give me some credibility on the play. Then we can all go along with it. So we have Van Vliet, Siakam, Embiid, and Giannis in at the forward spots there. We still have a center to go to, and because Jokic isn't on the slate, I'm actually wondering if maybe it might be a move to put Embiid back at the center spot. Let's see where Alex has Towns, because I think Towns could be an interesting center play here. The minutes have been there for him since returning from COVID. I think the rates too are looking pretty good. Still no D'Angelo Russell. He's going to be out for a few weeks. Even, you know, Malik Beasley not starting last game. You'd think he comes back in there, takes a little away, but where's Alex have Towns? He's got Towns pretty low, which I'm surprised by. I would have Towns at 18. Alex has him at 32. Is there anybody at center, Terry, that looks particularly good to you? Maybe Joe Val. He's a little better, but not great.
There's a guy that we got I think it was a DM, might have been a message in the basketball Slack that popped up from Alex. There was a guy, if you reload the page, if you've been on the Super Draft projections for a minute, Willie Hernan Gomez wasn't on the page originally. I'm not saying this because he's exploding to the top of the projections, though. He's kind of a case like we were just talking about with Isaiah Stewart. He's got a very solid 1.85 multiplier tonight. He's a guy who was talked up on a little bit for Fanduel and a ton for Draftkings. So he's a guy who's buzzy in the industry. He's a guy I think a lot of people are going to click on this site, given that multiplier. He's only got a 25.22 projection. When you math that out, that gets him to 46.66. Even if he gives you a little bit of upside, we're really getting out of him there. So maybe upside to like 50, somewhere around there. The top of the board, we're talking about the high 60s after the multiplication with the guys that we've mentioned, the Embiids, the Van Vliets, the Siakams, and we don't have to worry about salaries with those guys. So I think it makes a lot of sense to just math these things out and then just go off the top of the board. And it takes a guy like that who's super buzzy around the industry and very big play on some of the other sites. It takes him and it puts him completely off the board for me, to the point where I think if people are rostering him, that's a mistake I want them to make.
No, I think that's fair. And actually, looking at the center position, it really does seem like Jonas Valanciunas, or Jonas Valanciunas is what I was going to say. I don't know why I went to the hard J, but Jonas Valanciunas, I think, is the center play you'd go to next. So I'm going to say let's move Embiid to center and take another forward. I think actually, normally that forward, the different position eligibility we talk about sometimes on these shows is super draft, where you'll find guys that are surprising, like Jason Tatum being a guard, Embiid being a forward, and that can add value. But there are other nights too where it doesn't make sense to take it just to take it. And I think I'd rather have a forward here because we have some forwards that are pretty well projected, including Tobias Harris. So you can go Tobias and Embiid, Terry, and Tobias is a 1 point. And Van Vliet and Siakam. So we're doing two pairs of teammates here. But do you want to go to Tobias? 1.35x multiplier for Awesemo. He's going to be the number 5 guy, or actually no, the number 6 guy. I've got him at the number 7 guy. So I'm pretty comfortable going to Tobias.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of doubling up the teams twice. That's the one thing that I would be a little concerned about. But that's not to say that the math isn't there by any means. It is. It's sitting there staring us in the face. So there's no real reason to avoid doing it. It's just something for me that starts to get a little weighty on getting to the very specific spots and then asking 2 of the guys from those spots to come through. I get a little bit of trepidation about it. And there's a couple plays that I like, guys that we did talk up from the Detroit game that are sitting right there at forward. One of whom is actually a center by trade in Mason Plumlee. The other one in Jeremy Grant that we could stick into that forward spot. So just for me, for wanting to get away from doubling up 2 pairs, I would maybe consider one of those guys. It's not to say that that's not a very sharp play with Harris by any means. He's a guy that we talked about from the other sites, and he's right there at the top of the board too. Guy who should see an uptick in usage, guy who should see an uptick in his assist rate tonight. So I definitely like the play. I just get a little concerned when we've got 2 of our spots and then 2 of our other spots coming from the same team.
So let's do it. We'll do a second lineup then, because I think we could do one with Tobias Harris and maybe even Seth Curry, who's got a 1.8x multiplier on him. But we can go it forward in this one then. Let's go. How do you feel? Or what's your appetite for danger? Do you want to go Chris Middleton at a 1.4x or Jeremy Grant at a 1.35x?
Ooh, which one of those are we considering dangerous?
I would say Middleton would be the one that many people consider dangerous, even if we don't necessarily. I would favor Grant, though, for whatever that's worth.
I'm going to favor Grant because that would walk us right back into that morass of having 2 guys from 2 teams, because we've got Giannis in there, right?
Yep. Okay. So good point. So let's do that then. Let's go Jeremy Grant at the final forward spot with Embiid at center. We got 2 guard spots left. And I would say for that, Delon Wright. So now we're doing the teammate thing again, but Delon Wright at 1.65x. He's Alex's number 5 projected guy.
Hard to avoid on this side.
Yeah, I mean, on this side, he looks amazing. I mean, a 5x, like I feel I like him on Draftkings, but I do think on Super Draft, like he's actually one of the stronger plays by I think any projections you could use.
Yeah, a 1.65 multiplier on him. If we're getting to guys where we're building in multiple guys, I like it to be a primary ball handler. I think that makes some sense. Guy who can create things on his own. So I guess I can get behind it. We finally talked into doubling up the second team. So yeah, let's do it. I think he makes some sense. And I think he's a play that people still, for whatever reason, just aren't looking at him the right way, I think. And since this is a site where maybe a little bit more of just personal decision-making, a little bit more personal bias comes into it, not a lot of people have projections, not a lot of sites have projections. I think it might be a less common, less popular click despite the heavy multiplier. So I think that gets us maybe a little bit of edge on the field too.
Run Pure for Life saying Super Draft is way too easy. Play whoever you want. What a joke. That's why you would want to play on a site like we talked about that with some sponsors. Like one of our other sponsors, No House Advantage. They talk. People have been like, "Oh, the props are too soft on there." For you, you want these things to be soft. You want it to be easy. You want it to also appear easy to other people, so they maybe make mistakes, like playing Willie Hernangomez, who probably is over projected, or on relative to other sites, or an Isaiah Stewart who doesn't look as good some nights, or doesn't look as good on Super Draft, but looks great as a value play. Like those are different things, and that's what gives you edge. So I think that's the wrong way to think about it. And especially when they're giving you money and they're having overlay, like if it's an easy site, go ahead, go be Rin Pack over on Super Draft and go win countless amounts of money and then come back to us and be like, oh, it was too easy on there. I won so much. Be like, oh, cool. I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. That's if it's that easy, keep your mouth shut and keep winning money.
I can't imagine like in DFS. I can't imagine ever being like, oh, this is too easy. Like I don't want to play it. I'm winning too much. I just hate it so much.
It's exactly like the person who sits at the poker table and tells the guy at the poker table who doesn't know what he's doing, what he did wrong in the last hand, so that he knows not to do it anymore. Keep your mouth shut. Take his money. Yeah, and look, it's not as easy as all of that, right? It's not a straight line down of, all right, I'm just going to play Embiid, Giannis, Siakam. Tonight it kind of is because that's like the top of the board. There's just not a lot of guys from that value tier with huge unexpected multipliers, not a lot of total oddball guys with role changes, things like that would then vault some of these guys into prominence. So we are getting a little bit of a straight line kind of a build tonight, but it doesn't always work that way. People would be winning in weird ways if it was just a matter of, I put LeBron and Giannis and Steph and Luka in my lineup and I won money. It was great. Not exactly.
It's not quite as easy as it may seem. And right. That's part of the appeal though, is that there you have the flexibility. And I think this is an example of it where we can get to Zach LaVine now as our final guard spot, 1.3x multiplier on him. He's Alex's number 7 overall. I'm a little lower on him, but I think for a guard and also, to kind of show for Super Draft, like I do think Zach LaVine's the way they stay in this game, like the way that they, keep it competitive and move it forward. So, Zach LaVine, a guy, high usage, really the Bulls' main vessel for everything they do. I have no issue with him on Super Draft. And I think this lineup would be getting close to impossible to afford on any other site because we got Embiid and Giannis. And like, this is the appeal of Super Draft that you're seeing, I think, in this particular lineup. You just couldn't get here on DraftKings or FanDuel.
Yeah. That's like I was saying, this is a night where it just happens that's a lot of really good names bubbled up to the top. But if these were different names attached to these exact same numbers, the plays wouldn't be any different. Right. So I don't care who the players are. I care about what the numbers are. It just so happens that these numbers are attached to big name players. So it sounds like we're taking a very straight line just through, a lot of stars and not worrying about it. But this is what the math happens to bear out tonight. But yeah, love the Zach LaVine call. He's right there at the top of my board as well. Playing great. I didn't realize, I think it was Adam on the deeper dive said, and I haven't checked this and I'm not entirely sure I'm quoting him accurately, but does he have the 4th best true shooting percentage in the league this year so far? I haven't had time to about.
Sorry, I was reading
Zach LaVine.
Oh, yeah. Let me pull it up. I'll look at it.
I think Adam said it was the 4th best true shooting percentage in the league to this point of the year, which.
Oh, he's 65% true shooting, which is up from 59% last year. So, I mean, that to me sounds like it should be like that's better than, Harden levels.
Yeah. I knew he was playing really well, but I didn't realize it had bubbled up to that point. I mean, that is star level play. So, yeah. I called him a player who was not quite a star in that next weird tier down in the column the other day, and I think he's proven me wrong. I think I got to change that.
And if you're one of those people too, who does worry about defense, not having Ben Simmons in this spot is going to be a real additive for a guy like Zach LaVine, who I think would have found it pretty tough going against Simmons. He's still probably, he's going to get his shots up, so it doesn't matter. But, I think in this spot now, he's going to be going against Danny Green and Tobias and Seth Curry. And I think that's going to look a lot better for Zach LaVine's prospects. Got a super chat from our boy, Jeremiah Lucero, asking Donovan Mitchell and Cam Reddish or LaVine and Thibault. I don't think he gave a site, Jeremiah, but if we are talking about Super Draft, let's see who that would be. Let's see, Donovan Mitchell. Sorry, I'm going back to Alex's thing. It's hard to do a 2 versus 2 comparison because I don't know these like the back of my hand. Mitchell looks pretty solid, and yeah, I don't the Thibault thing. I wouldn't play Thibault on Super Draft. I don't think so. That would be my question. If you're playing on a different site though, like he's got a 1.95x multiplier, but we're talking about a 1.95x multiplier on a guy with a 22-point raw projection. So I would go Mitchell and Cam Reddish by a pretty wide margin, but he might be talking about like DraftKings or FanDuel.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Thibault on Super Draft falls right into that bucket of just there's not enough raw projection there, so you would need over a 2 multiplier to get him to thrust him into relevance. I think I would take the Mitchell side of it too on the other sites as well. I just like I said when we were talking about Philly, I was just not. I was hoping not to get to some of those also ran pieces, the replacement level guys on that team right now, and he's one of them. So I was really trying to just steer clear of that and focus on like Seth Curry, Tobias, and Joel Embiid, and for me, Danny Green.
Frank M asking, will we go Plumlee or Valanciunas? It does seem like so Plumlee, I think, has a better projection from Awesemo, and actually, let's see, he's Awesemo's number 10 overall play. He's actually my number 8 overall, and I would put Plumlee ahead of Jonas. Now I'm thinking about it. We had Plumlee listed as a forward, but I think he has center eligibility too on Super Draft. Let me just double check that to make sure, but. Yeah, he's got both. I think actually I would put Plumlee ahead of Jonas, even though that does sound kind of crazy, but 1.7x multiplier on Plumlee is a difference maker there.
Yeah, guys who should come in relatively close to one another in terms of median score. I think if you pick up a decent enough difference in the multiplier, that could make a big difference. Just going off of FanDuel projection, which is a different system, 36.2 for Joe Val and 31.3 for Plumlee in my numbers. Alex had it 37.3. 32.8, so pretty close. We both had Joe Val a little bit higher. Ownership wise on that site, he was going to be, I think, lower owned. So I would maybe lean into Joe Val if you can afford the salary difference. A little bit of a looks like a $900 salary difference.
So all right, we got on the 2 tournaments now. So 2,800 out of 3,900 on the jump shot. So still a decent chance of having some at least decreased rake on that one. I think they're probably going to get close with the people usually dump in a big good amount towards the end here, but still a decent chance of decreased rake, which is actually very valuable to you guys. Not as much, as a value as overlay is where they're putting money into the tournament, but it's still something where, you're going to find more value by not paying rake on sites. Definitely. There's actually been the whole marketing campaign to some of the sites that no longer exist out there. Not paying rake is very crucial. And the 4-point play has 4,000 out of 5,750. So probably trending a little bit closer towards having overlay there. That one's got $4 entries. So play on superdraft.io, put a lineup in. We just gave you one straight away here. I'll read it out one more time. Delon Wright, Fred VanVleet, Zach LaVine, Pascal Siakam, Jeremy Grant, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Joel Embiid. That's the lineup we put in there. And I feel pretty good about that one finding its way to the cash line on Superdraft at least. Anybody, Terry, that jumps out to you that we haven't hit on? Norman Powell, I think, looks pretty good if you are giving him the boost of no Kyle Lowry. I could see this being more of a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander site where I didn't want to get to him at all on DraftKings today. Thank the sweet Lord Jesus, I can be away from that for one day, the headaches that occur with Shai. But I think on Super Draft with the 1.35x multiplier, playing Milwaukee, I could see there's some pathway there. But anybody else you would play on Super Draft that you didn't play on FanDuel or DraftKings tonight?
SGA was one that did stand out to me just because he looked a little bit better earlier in the day, and it made me wonder, I don't know if I got to him, and I did write him up in my column. By the way, guys, somebody wrote in asking about that, why my numbers in the column were different than the numbers that we had at the 6:30 update. I write that column between like 1 and 2 in the afternoon usually. Things change. So if you see numbers different, default to the updated version on the site. That's different people that I see for Super Draft. That was the question. Kemba was a guy that was coming up for me in FanDuel, but we didn't really talk about him here. I think he's somewhat relevant in what should be a pretty cake matchup for him and still getting a pretty good multiplier, 155. I think real fully healthy, fully productive, normal Kemba Walker would probably be significantly under that. So that's probably akin to a misprice on FanDuel or DraftKings where guys just coming in at the wrong mark. Taking a look down. Kyle Anderson, another guy that we mentioned a couple times in terms of that Memphis game, getting a few additional looks with Dylan Brooks coming off the court and probably being the guy who sees a few extra minutes. 155 multiplier on him could make some sense. That's getting you down into the range where he's going to need to do a little bit more on top of his median projection to really get into the right range of with that multiplier. But it's not off the board by any means. Beyond that, you're starting to get into that mix and match territory where you're asking a decent amount from some of these guys.
Let's see. I'm looking at any other questions here. The Lance Company asking, is John Morant a good pick for Super Draft? And got about a minute left here by the time you guys hear this to get your lineups in on Super Draft. So make sure you're doing that. And we'll update you guys, see if there's any overlay, because it's always curious and interesting to see how it goes on there. Let's see. John Morant.
He is. Yeah, 1-5 multiplier, kind of maybe like 20th on the board or so. I'm not counting it, just eyeballing it, like 20th down the board.
Actually, I would have him higher. I'd have him as top 10. I have him as my number 9 guy. Alex has him as number 19. So to me, he's definitely a guy you're getting, at least if you're putting in a second lineup or a third lineup on Super Draft, but he's very much in the mix. Nice multiplier on him. And playing Detroit, Detroit does play slow, but that defense is so bad. And I don't think it's going to get much better by not having Blake and Derrick Rose, even though those guys are obviously terrible defenders. Jeremy Grant has basically given up on defense now, so he could shoot 50 times in a game. So I think that for the most part, feel pretty good about John Morant today, even if I wasn't playing him much on DraftKings. Actually, I guess he's one of those guys. I didn't play much on DraftKings, but on Super Draft, he'd definitely be a guy I'd get, if not in my first lineup, in my second.
Yeah, it makes sense. I like the call. I think he's in play. Whoever asked that question, that's a very good call by you. And yeah, it looks like I didn't really get to very much of him on FanDuel, so that would be a good play for me to look into over on Super Draft as well. I really like that idea. Just, you didn't play these guys over here, play them over there. I did have them 10%. All right.
All right, that's the Lance Company sleeper today. So hope it works out for you guys. We are locked here for Super Draft. So we appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Come back in half an hour because we're doing the late slate sweat and swap, talking about the late slate, talking about what's going on in the main slate. If EMAC had a lot of Chetty today, you're going to hear about it coming up in a half hour, it seems. So we appreciate you guys watching. Terry, giving the plugs here. I know you got stuff going on all weekend long.
Yeah, I'll be doing the game plan show tomorrow afternoon at 3:00 for subscribers. As long as I remember not to close my fantasy cruncher tonight, we'll be diving into late swaptimizer. If I do close it, we'll come up with something else on the fly, take a look at some lineups, and have a good show anyway. Going to be on live before lock after that, writing the usual column during the afternoon. Sunday, be writing the deep dive column, back on live before lock, or the deeper dive rather, with Laffy before the live before lock. So I'll be in your lives all weekend again.
And I'll be back tomorrow. I will be back in a half an hour. So that's the most important part. But I'll be back tomorrow as well, doing the deeper dive with Greg Ehrenberg. So tune in then, and we'll take this half hour. Tyler and I, our producer, will take this half hour and come back bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for one more hour. The L3S coming up. We appreciate you guys. Have great success tonight, really and truly. And we'll see you guys again soon. Good luck.